I wasn't supposed to notice. That's what I figured out since this whole mess started. I was just supposed to do my job, keep my head down, and not ask questions. The problem is, I've never been good at that last part. The rifle strap dug into my shoulder as I adjusted it for the third time in 20 minutes. Military-grade equipment, supposedly the best available, and the damn thing still chafed like it was designed by someone who'd never actually worn one. The weight of the M27 felt heavier than usual today. Maybe it was the ship. Everything felt heavier on the Meridian. "You planning on adjusting that thing all day, Alvarez?" Sergeant Simmons asked, not even turning his head to look at me as we walked the corridor. "Sorry, Sarge. Just can't seem to get it right." "Been in the Corps 4 years and you still can't figure out a rifle strap? What did they teach you in training?" "How to shoot straight," I said. "Never said anything about comfort." Simmons grunted, which was about as close to a laugh as he usually got. 6 weeks we'd been assigned together, and I'd learned to read his noises. A grunt could mean anything from mild amusement to impending ass-chewing. This one seemed safe enough. Private Bush walked a few steps behind us, keeping quiet like he usually did. Kid was only 23, but had eyes that caught everything. I'd noticed that about him right away. Didn't talk much, but he watched. Reminded me of myself when I first enlisted. The Meridian wasn't like any transport vessel I'd served on before. Massive didn't begin to describe it. 12 decks, 4 separate cell blocks, capacity for 5,000 prisoners, and a crew of 800. The government called it a correctional transport vessel, but everyone knew what it really was, a prison ship. The kind of place they send people they don't want anyone asking about. We rounded the corner into cell block C, and the familiar antiseptic smell hit me. Every part of this ship smelled the same, like industrial cleaner trying to cover up the scent of too many humans packed into too small a space. The lighting was always the same too, bright enough to see clearly, but dim enough to remind you that sunshine was something that happened elsewhere. Through the reinforced viewports, I could see rows of cells stretching out in perfect grid formation. Orange jumpsuits moved around inside like goldfish in tiny bowls. Some paced, some sat motionless, some pressed against the small windows in their cell doors, watching us as we watched them. "How many prisoners we got on board now?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Simmons tapped the tablet mounted on his forearm. "Manifest says 3,000 even. Capacity's running at 60%. I nodded, looking through the viewport again. 3,000. I'd been counting cells since I came aboard 2 weeks ago. The numbers weren't adding up, but I hadn't said anything yet. Wanted to be sure before I opened my mouth. "Something on your mind, Alvarez?" Simmons asked. I hesitated. Simmons was solid. Career military, but not the kind who followed orders blindly. Still, this assignment had everyone on edge. We'd been told this was high-security transport, that these prisoners were the worst kind of offenders. Terrorists, traitors, violent criminals too dangerous for regular incarceration. But no one had actually briefed us on specifics. "Just thinking about the rotation schedule," I lied. "We've been on morning patrol 3 days straight." Simmons gave me a look that said he wasn't buying it, but he didn't push. "Yeah, well, Lieutenant Burke says we're short-handed in this sector. Deal with it." We continued our patrol, walking the length of the corridor that ran alongside Cell Block C. Each step echoed against the metal flooring. The ship itself seemed to hum constantly, a low vibration you could feel in your teeth if you paid attention to it long enough. "Hey, Sarge," Bush said suddenly, breaking his silence. "Look at this." We stopped where Bush was standing, peering through one of the viewports. He pointed to the security display next to it, which showed the cell occupancy data for this section. "What am I looking at, Private?" Simmons asked. "The system shows all cells occupied in Section 8, but I count at least 4 empty ones from here." Simmons frowned and tapped at his tablet. "Manifest shows full occupancy for this section, probably just a transfer in progress." "No transfer orders logged for today," Bush said, then added quickly, "Sir." I moved closer to the viewport, counting the cells myself. Bush was right. Cells 815, 822, 834, and 839 were definitely empty, but the security system showed them as occupied. Could be a glitch in the system, I offered, but I didn't believe it. Military systems don't glitch. Not like this. Simmons was quiet for a moment, his eyes moving between his tablet and the cells. "Let's continue the patrol," he finally said, his voice lower than before. "I'll mention the discrepancy to tech support later." We resumed walking, but something had changed. I could feel it in the way Simmons moved, more alert now, his eyes scanning everything. Bush had fallen back into silence, but his posture had changed too, more rigid than before. "Been noticing things like that all week," I said quietly when we were far enough away from the nearest security camera. "Numbers don't match up." Simmons didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was careful. "What kind of numbers?" "Prisoner count. Manifest says 3,000, but I've been keeping track. Cell occupancy doesn't add up to more than 2,700 at most." "You've been counting cells?" Simmons raised an eyebrow. "Not all at once, but section by section, yeah. The numbers are off by at least 300. Could be prisoners in medical or in isolation," Simmons suggested, but I could tell he was thinking about it. "Medical ward capacity is 60. Isolation has 40 cells. Even if both were full, that's still 200 prisoners unaccounted for." Bush cleared his throat behind us. "I noticed something similar in Block D yesterday. Manifest showed full occupancy, but I counted at least 20 empty cells." Simmons stopped walking and turned to face us both, his expression hard to read. "Listen to me carefully. We complete this patrol. We go about our duties. Don't mention this to anyone else until I've had a chance to look into it. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Bush and I said in unison. We finished our patrol in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. By the time we reached the end of cell block C, I'd spotted 6 more empty cells that should have been occupied according to the system. When we returned to the security station, Lieutenant Burke was waiting for us. She stood with perfect posture, her uniform pressed so crisply you could probably cut yourself on the creases. Everything about Burke was precise, her movements, her speech, the way she looked at you like she was calculating your value to the nearest decimal point. "Sergeant Simmons, report," she said, not bothering with a greeting. "Patrol completed, ma'am. Cell block C secure. No incidents to report." I watched her face, wondering if I should mention the cell discrepancies. Before I could decide, Simmons continued. "There may be an issue with the manifest system, Lieutenant. We observed several cells showing as occupied when they were clearly empty." Burke's expression didn't change. "The manifest system is operating correctly, Sergeant. Any discrepancies you observed are due to scheduled prisoner transfers that haven't been updated in the system yet." "With respect, ma'am, there were no transfers scheduled for today," Simmons said. "There were unscheduled transfers," Burke replied, her tone making it clear the subject was closed. "Is there anything else to report?" "No, ma'am," Simmons said after a brief pause. "Good. Corporal Cole will relieve you for good. Corporal Cole will relieve you for the next patrol. Alvarez, you're assigned to prisoner escort duty. Mess hall rotation starts in 20 minutes. "Yes, ma'am," I said, keeping my face neutral even though my mind was racing. Burke gave us all one last appraising look before walking away, her boots clicking precisely against the metal floor. I waited until she was out of earshot before turning to Simmons. "Unscheduled transfers? That's not here," Simmons cut me off, his voice low. "Security cameras." He was right. The Meridian had surveillance everywhere except the crew quarters and bathrooms. We'd been briefed on that when we boarded, for our safety and the security of the vessel, they said. Now it felt more like we were the ones being watched. Bush shifted uncomfortably beside us. "I should report to my next post." "Go ahead, Private," Simmons said. "Remember what I said." Bush nodded and headed off down another corridor. I adjusted my rifle strap again, more out of habit than necessity now. "Prisoner escort duty," I muttered. "Lucky me." "Keep your eyes open," Simmons said quietly. "But don't make it obvious you're looking for anything." I nodded. What about you? Going to check some records, see if I can find any pattern to these unscheduled transfers. He checked his watch. You better get moving. Mess hall duty's a pain in the ass if you're late. 20 minutes later, I was standing in the massive mess hall of Cell Block B, watching as prisoners filed in for their midday meal. My job was simple. Stand there, looking intimidating, make sure nobody started anything, and escort them back when they were done. Boring work, but it gave me a chance to observe. The prisoners came in groups of 50, each group assigned a 30-minute slot to eat. They wore identical orange jumpsuits with numbers printed on the back and chest. No names, just numbers. Some had additional markings, colored bands on their wrists that indicated special handling requirements. Red for violent offenders, blue for flight risks, yellow for medical conditions. I'd been doing this rotation for a week now, long enough to start recognizing faces. There was an older man with a scar that ran from his left eye to his chin who always sat alone. A pair of younger guys who looked enough alike to be brothers, always at the same table near the back wall. A woman with intricate tattoos covering both arms who never touched her food. As I watched them file in for today's meal, something felt off. I scanned the faces, trying to figure out what was bothering me. Then it hit me. The man with the facial scar wasn't there. He'd been in every meal rotation for the past week, always sitting at the same table, always alone. Now, he was gone. I checked the security tablet mounted on the wall. It showed the current group's prisoner manifest. I scrolled through it, looking for prisoner 1854, the number I'd seen on the scarred man's jumpsuit. According to the system, he was present and accounted for, but he definitely wasn't in the room. My heart rate picked up a notch. This wasn't just a numerical discrepancy on a manifest. This was a specific person I'd seen every day who was now gone, but the system said he was here. Something wrong, Alvarez? I turned to find Corporal Dakota Cole standing next to me. I hadn't heard him approach. Cole was one of those guys who always looked slightly rumpled, like he'd just woken up but somehow never got called out for it. Just checking the manifest, I said, trying to sound casual. Cole glanced at the tablet. Looks all good to me. 50 prisoners, all present. Yeah, I said, deciding to take a risk. Except I don't see prisoner 1854, older guy, facial scar, been in this same meal group all week. Cole shrugged, completely unconcerned. Transfers happen all the time. You know how it is. Without updating the system? System updates once a day at 0200. Anything that happens between updates shows up tomorrow. He said it like it was the most normal thing in the world. Don't sweat the small stuff, man. Makes the shift go by slower. I wanted to point out that missing prisoners weren't small stuff, but I remembered Simmons' warning. Don't make it obvious. So instead, I just nodded. Guess you're right. Just seemed weird. Nothing weird about it, Cole said, then grinned. Unless you think we've got ghosts making people disappear. He laughed at his own joke, but something in his eyes didn't match the casual tone. He was watching me too carefully, gauging my reaction. Yeah, that would be something, I said, forcing a smile. Haunted prison ship. Could sell the movie rights. Cole seemed satisfied with my response and moved on, doing a casual circuit of the mess hall. I stayed where I was, my mind working overtime. Over the next hour, as the different groups cycled through for their meals, I paid closer attention to the faces. By the end of the shift, I'd identified 3 more prisoners who should have been there according to the manifest, but weren't. Each time, the system showed them as present when they clearly weren't. When my shift ended, I headed back to the crew quarters, my uneasiness growing with every step. This wasn't right. None of it was right. People don't just disappear without records, not in the military. Everything gets documented, logged, filed in triplicate. That's how the system works. I found Simmons in the small gym area adjacent to our quarters, doing pull-ups on the bar. No one else was around. I waited until he dropped down before speaking. We need to talk, I said quietly. He grabbed a towel and wiped his face. About? 4 more missing. System shows them present, but they're gone. Simmons didn't look surprised. Block B? I nodded. Mess hall duty. I recognized them from previous shifts. Now they're gone, but the manifest says they're still here. He draped the towel around his neck and looked around the empty gym. I checked the records. No transfer orders filed for any prisoner in the last 2 weeks. Not a single one. That's impossible. People are definitely missing. I know. He lowered his voice even further. And it gets worse. I cross-referenced the medical logs. No deaths reported either. According to official records, not a single prisoner has left this ship since we departed Earth Station. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. So where are they going? That's what we need to find out. Simmons glanced at his watch. I'm on patrol with Burke in 20. Can't talk more now. Meet me in Maintenance Corridor 7B after final shift. 2300 hours. I nodded, understanding the choice of location. The maintenance corridors were less heavily monitored than the main areas of the ship. Not completely free of surveillance, but easier to have a conversation without being overheard. Be careful, Simmons added, his expression serious. Don't ask questions. Don't let anyone know you've noticed anything off. Just observe and remember. What about Bush? Should we bring him in? Simmons considered this. Not yet. Kid's observant but inexperienced. Might not know how to keep a poker face. We need more information before we expand this investigation. The way he hesitated before saying investigation told me everything I needed to know about how serious this was. We weren't just looking into a clerical error or system glitch. Something was happening on this ship that wasn't supposed to be happening, and someone was covering it up. I spent the rest of my shift escorting prisoner groups to and from their exercise period in Block A. The whole time, I was counting, observing, memorizing faces and numbers. By the end of the shift, I'd identified 7 more prisoners who were listed on the manifest but weren't physically present. The first week on the Meridian had felt off from the beginning. The limited briefing, the vague descriptions of our mission, the insistence on strict adherence to protocol without explaining why. But now, with people literally disappearing while the system pretended they were still here, that feeling had transformed from vague unease to concrete suspicion. As I walked back to my quarters to change before meeting Simmons, I passed Lieutenant Burke in the corridor. She nodded curtly, and I returned the gesture, keeping my face carefully blank. Had she always looked at me that way, or was I just now noticing the calculation in her eyes? I thought about the missing prisoners, about the discrepancies in the manifest, about Cole's casual dismissal of my concerns. None of it made sense, but all of it pointed to something fundamentally wrong with our mission aboard the Meridian. The ship hummed around me, its massive engines propelling us through space toward a destination we'd never been clearly told. 3,000 prisoners, they'd said. But the numbers didn't add up. People were vanishing without record, and no one seemed concerned except me and Simmons. Whatever secret the Meridian was hiding, I had a feeling I wouldn't like the answer when I found it. But I knew I had to keep looking. Because if no one else was going to ask questions about what happened to these people, then it fell to me to find out. I was 2 weeks into the rotation when it happened. Not that I'd been counting the days or anything. Time gets weird on these long-haul transports. The artificial day cycles, the recycled air, the same gray corridors stretching on forever. But I'd definitely been on the Meridian for 2 weeks when I saw something that changed everything. That morning started normal enough. I got assigned to prisoner escort duty with Simmons, moving a group of 50 from the wreck area back to their cells in Block C. Standard procedure, nothing special. We'd done it 100 times before. Alvarez, you take point. I'll bring up the rear, Simmons said, adjusting his rifle. Keep 'em moving, no stops. I nodded, taking position at the front of the group. Corridor 7 was one of the main thoroughfares, wide enough for 4 people to walk side by side, with those institutional blue-gray walls and bright overhead lighting that made everyone look sick. The kind of place designed to remind you exactly where you were, in case you forgot. The prisoners shuffled along behind me, orange jumpsuits making them easy to track. Most kept their heads down, hands at their sides. These weren't the worst offenders. Those stayed in Block A under heavier security. Block C housed mainly non-violent offenders, though non-violent was relative when you're dealing with people who'd committed crimes serious enough to end up on an interstellar prison transport. I recognized most of them by now. There was Mendoza with his perpetual scowl, Chen, who always walked with a slight limp, and Luis Medina near the back. Tall guy, burly, with those prison tats crawling up his neck. Medina had a reputation for pushing boundaries, testing the guards, seeing what he could get away with. But he'd never caused real trouble, not on my watch anyway. We were about halfway down Corridor 7 when I heard it. That unmistakable sound of bodies colliding, followed by angry voices. I turned just in time to see Medina shoving another prisoner. Wilson, I think his name was. Smaller guy, maybe half Medina's size. "Hey!" I shouted, already moving toward them. "Break it up!" The other prisoners started backing away, creating space around the altercation. Smart move on their part. They knew the drill: get involved in a fight, lose privileges, stand too close, get mistaken for being involved. Either way, not worth it. Simmons was already moving forward from the back of the group, but I was closer. I reached for my baton, standard procedure when verbal commands weren't working. Medina had Wilson by the collar now, their faces inches apart. "Last warning," I called out, my voice echoing in the corridor. "Stand down, Medina." And then it happened. 1 second Medina was there, all 240 pounds of him, solid as a wall. The next, something wasn't right. His expression changed, not anger anymore, but confusion. Then fear, pure fear. It was his eyes that got me. They went wide, panicked. His mouth opened like he was trying to say something, but no sound came out. And then, I still don't know how to describe this part, he started stretching. Not like he was reaching for something, but like his whole body was being pulled backward by some invisible force. His torso elongated, his arms splayed out, and his face, Jesus, his face contorted in a way that human faces just don't. I froze. My training hadn't covered whatever the hell this was. The whole thing couldn't have lasted more than 3 seconds. Medina's body distorted, stretched impossibly thin, and then gone. Just fucking gone. One moment he was there, and the next there was nothing but empty space where a 240-pound man had been standing. The corridor erupted into chaos, prisoners shouting, backing away, some trying to run. I stood there for a second, trying to process what I'd just seen. It wasn't possible. People don't just disappear. "What the hell was that?" Wilson was shouting, backing away from the spot where Medina had been. "What the fuck just happened?" I snapped back to training mode. "Everyone stay where you are," I commanded, raising my baton. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Against the walls now!" Simmons had pushed his way through the crowd, weapon raised. "Alvarez, report!" "What happened?" I opened my mouth, closed it again. How do you explain something you don't understand yourself? "Medina," I managed. "He's gone." "Gone where?" Simmons scanned the corridor, clearly thinking Medina had somehow slipped past in the confusion. "No, I swallowed hard. "He disappeared, right in front of me. He was just gone." Simmons gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Concern? Disbelief? I didn't blame him. I wouldn't have believed it either if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. I reached for my radio, thumb pressing the call button maybe harder than necessary. Security alert in Corridor 7. Prisoner Luis Medina, ID 8547, is missing. Request immediate backup. The response came back almost immediately, Lieutenant Burke's clipped voice. "Copy that. Security team en route. Contain remaining prisoners." We got the prisoners lined up against the wall, hands on their heads. Standard containment procedure. But there was nothing standard about the way they were acting. Shifting nervously, whispering to each other, eyes darting around the corridor like they expected to be next. I couldn't blame them. I felt the same way. Burke arrived with a 4-person security team 3 minutes later. She took one look at the situation, prisoners against the wall, Simmons and me standing guard, and frowned. "Report," she demanded, striding toward me. I explained what I'd seen as clearly as I could. The fight starting, Medina grabbing Wilson, the impossible way Medina's body had distorted before disappearing entirely. Burke's expression didn't change as I spoke, but her eyes narrowed slightly. When I finished, she turned to Simmons. "Sergeant, your account?" "I was at the rear of the group, Lieutenant. Didn't see the initial altercation. By the time I reached the front, Medina was gone, and the prisoners were panicking." Burke nodded, then turned to the security team. "Count them." One of the officers moved down the line, counting each prisoner. 49, Lieutenant." "And how many left the wreck area?" I answered immediately. 50, ma'am. I counted them myself when we started the escort." Burke's mouth tightened into a thin line. She tapped her tablet, scrolling through what I assumed was the manifest. 49 prisoners were scheduled for this transport, Private Alvarez. "That's not possible," I said, forgetting protocol for a moment. "I counted 50. Simmons can confirm." Simmons cleared his throat. "With respect, Lieutenant, I also counted 50 at departure." Burke looked between us, then back at her tablet. "The manifest shows 49. Perhaps one of you miscounted." "Both of us?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "And what about Medina? He was here, and then he wasn't." "I'll review the security footage," Burke said, her tone making it clear the discussion was over. "In the meantime, complete the transport and file your reports. All of you," she added, looking at the security team. I wanted to argue, to make her understand what I'd seen wasn't a mistake or a trick of the light, but I knew that look. The conversation was over. We finished escorting the prisoners back to their cells in Block C. Neither of us spoke until the last cell door had closed and we were heading back to the security station to file our reports. "You believe me, right?" I asked Simmons, keeping my voice low. "About what happened to Medina?" Simmons glanced around, making sure no one was within earshot. "I didn't see it happen," he said carefully. "But I counted 50 prisoners at the start of escort, same as you. And now there's 49. Something's not adding up." That was as close to agreement as I was going to get from Simmons. He wasn't the type to make claims he couldn't back up with his own eyes. I appreciated that about him, even if part of me wanted him to just say outright that he believed me. I spent the next hour writing up my report, being as detailed and precise as possible about what I'd seen. The fight starting, Medina grabbing Wilson, the way Medina's body had distorted, stretched, before vanishing completely. I knew how it sounded, like I was hallucinating or making things up, but it was what I saw. After submitting the report, I headed to the mess hall for a late lunch. I wasn't hungry, but I needed to do something normal, something routine, to try and make sense of what had happened. I spotted technical specialist Randy Rodriguez sitting alone at one of the tables, tablet in front of him as he ate. Rodriguez handled security systems, including the cameras that monitored every corridor and room on the Meridian. I grabbed a tray of whatever they were serving, some kind of reconstituted protein that was trying and failing to be beef stew, and made my way over. "Mind if I join you?" I asked, already setting my tray down. Rodriguez looked up, nodded. "Alvarez, heard you had some excitement today. News traveled fast on a ship this size." "Yeah, you could say that." I took a seat across from him. "Actually, I was hoping you might have some insight. You review the security footage yet?" "Just finished," he said, turning his tablet so I could see. "Lieutenant Burke asked me to check it immediately." On the screen was Corridor 7, the exact spot where I'd seen Medina vanish. The timestamp matched, 14:37, right when it happened. I watched as the footage showed the prisoners moving through the corridor, me at the front, Simmons at the back. Then I saw myself turn, move toward the back of the group. The camera angle showed the whole corridor clearly. But there was no fight, no Medina grabbing Wilson, no impossible stretching or vanishing. Just prisoners walking, then suddenly scattering, backing against the walls as Simmons and I shouted orders. "That's not right," I said, leaning closer to the screen. "Play it again." Rodriguez obliged, starting the footage over. I watched more carefully this time, counting the prisoners. 49, not 50. "There's no Medina," I said, looking up at Rodriguez. "He's not even in the footage." Rodriguez shrugged. According to the manifest, Luis Medina wasn't scheduled to be in that transport group. But he was there. I saw him. Camera doesn't lie. Alvarez. He took his tablet back, closing the video. "Look, I don't know what you think you saw, but the footage is clear. 49 prisoners, no disappearances, no anomalies." I sat back, food forgotten. "What about the other cameras in the corridor? Different angles?" "Check those too. Same result." Rodriguez took a bite of his food, chewing thoughtfully. "If it helps, the official report lists Medina as transferred to Medical Bay 7 earlier this morning. Routine health check." It didn't help. It made everything worse, because now I was being told not just that I hadn't seen what I'd seen, but that what I'd seen hadn't even been possible because Medina wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. I finished my meal quickly, thanked Rodriguez for his time, and left the mess hall. Instead of heading back to my quarters, I made a detour. Medical Bay 7 was 3 decks up from where I was, in the restricted section of the ship where higher security prisoners received medical treatment. I didn't have clearance for Medical Bay 7, not technically, but I did have access to the ship's internal systems through my security credentials. I found a vacant terminal in one of the monitoring stations and logged in, pulling up the medical records for the day. I searched for Luis Medina, ID 8547. The system took a few seconds to process, then returned the results. No records found. I tried again, this time searching just by ID number. Still nothing. I expanded the search to all medical bays, all dates since our departure. Nothing. According to the Meridian's medical system, Luis Medina didn't exist. I logged out quickly, my mind racing. The manifest showed 49 prisoners scheduled for transport, not 50. The security footage showed 49 prisoners, not 50. The medical records showed no Luis Medina, but I'd seen him. I'd seen him every day for the past 2 weeks during prisoner counts and escorts. I'd seen him disappear right in front of me. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. I volunteered for extra escort duties, spent time reviewing manifests, comparing prisoner counts, and I started noticing things. Small discrepancies at first. A prisoner I recognized not being in the mess hall when they should be. A face missing from recreation periods. Then bigger ones. Entire groups not returning from scheduled activities, their numbers mysteriously adjusted in the system to make it seem like nothing was wrong. I filed reports. Each one was either ignored or explained away. Unscheduled transfers, system glitches, misidentification on my part. During one of my shifts in Block D, I counted 23 empty cells that should have been occupied according to the previous day's manifest. When I reported it to Lieutenant Burke, she pulled up the current manifest on her tablet, showing all cells properly assigned. "The manifest is automatically updated by the system, Private," she said, not bothering to hide her impatience. "If you're seeing discrepancies, it's because you're comparing outdated information. With respect, Lieutenant, I checked the manifest yesterday. Those cells were occupied, and now they're not." She closed her tablet with a decisive click. "Prisoners get transferred. Schedules change. That's how it works on a ship this size." "Where are they being transferred to?" I pressed. "There's no record in the system." Burke's expression hardened. "That's above your clearance level, Alvarez. I suggest you focus on your assigned duties and leave ship operations to those responsible for them." That night, I met with Simmons in one of the maintenance corridors, away from cameras and listening devices. I told him everything: Medina's disappearance, the doctored footage, the missing medical records, the empty cells in Block D. You think I'm crazy? I asked when I'd finished. Simmons leaned against the wall, arms crossed. If you're crazy, then I am too. I've been counting empty cells for the past week. Numbers don't add up. So what's happening? Where are these people going? He shook his head. Don't know, but I do know this. Whatever's happening, it goes high up. Burke, Dixon, maybe higher. They all know something we don't. About the disappearances? About the real mission of the Meridian. Simmons lowered his voice even further. This ship isn't just a prison transport. Never has been. We're carrying something else, or doing something else. The prisoners are part of it somehow. I thought about Medina, the fear in his eyes just before he vanished. The way his body had distorted, stretched, like he was being pulled into… what? Another dimension. Some kind of experimental technology. We need to find out what's happening, I said, before more people disappear. Simmons nodded. Carefully, though. Whatever this is, they're willing to alter records, doctor footage to cover it up. That means they won't hesitate to make problems disappear too. He didn't need to spell it out. If we pushed too hard, asked too many questions, we might be next. I lay in my bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the image of Medina vanishing over and over in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all just pawns in something much bigger and much worse than a simple prison transport mission. The Meridian continued its journey through deep space, its engines humming beneath us, carrying us and its dwindling cargo of prisoners toward whatever destination awaited. But now I understood. Some of us wouldn't make it there. And no one in charge seemed concerned about that fact, except me and Simmons. And I wasn't sure how much longer we'd be allowed to keep asking questions. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing Medina, the way his body just stretched and folded before he vanished. It didn't make sense. People don't just disappear. But I saw it happen, right in front of me. The mess hall was nearly empty when I got there. Night shift had already eaten, and day shift wouldn't start filing in for another 20 minutes. Just the way I wanted it. I needed coffee and quiet to sort through everything. I spotted Bush sitting alone in the corner, hunched over his breakfast tray. He wasn't eating, just pushing the eggs around with his fork. His eyes had that hollow look, the kind you get when something's eating at you from the inside. I grabbed my coffee and walked over. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. Bush looked up, startled. "Oh, yeah, sure." I slid onto the bench across from him. "You all right? You look like shit." "Thanks," he muttered. He glanced around the mess hall before leaning forward. "Haven't been sleeping much." "Join the club." I took a sip of my coffee. It was terrible, but it was hot. "Something on your mind?" Bush set his fork down and rubbed his eyes. "I heard about what happened yesterday with that prisoner, Medina." I tensed up. "What did you hear?" "That he tried to start something and then disappeared during transport." Bush's voice dropped even lower. "They're saying you miscounted or that you're making it up." "Who's saying that?" "Everyone. Command. The other guards." He shrugged. "But I don't think you're making it up." I studied his face. There was something there, something he wasn't saying. "Why's that?" Bush looked around again, then leaned in closer. "Because I've seen it too." His words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them in too long. 3 times now, during my shifts in Block D. My heart started hammering in my chest. "You've seen prisoners disappear?" He nodded. "First time was about 3 weeks ago. Prisoner named Gonzalez. He was just walking back to his cell after mealtime and then…" Bush made a gesture with his hand. "Gone, like he got pulled into the wall itself." "What did you do?" "Reported it, like I was supposed to. Lieutenant Burke told me he'd been relocated overnight and I just wasn't informed. Said it was a paperwork issue." Bush's jaw tightened. "Then it happened again last week. 2 more. Different days." "And let me guess, more relocations?" "Exactly. Same story each time. But I checked the system myself. No transfer orders, no relocations. Just gone from the records like they never existed." I sat back, letting this sink in. It wasn't just me. I wasn't imagining things. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Bush pushed his tray away. "Because everyone's talking about you seeing the same thing. And I thought, I don't know, maybe you'd believe me. Maybe we could figure out what's happening." I took another sip of my coffee, thinking, "Have you told anyone else, Simmons?" "No, just you." He hesitated. I was starting to think I was going crazy. "You're not crazy. I saw it happen. Clear as day." I leaned forward. "We need to find out what's going on. I've been noticing discrepancies in the manifest for weeks now. Empty cells that show as occupied. Missing prisoners that still show up on the roster." Bush nodded. "I've seen that too. But how do we prove it? Every time I've tried to follow up, the system shows something different than what I saw." I drummed my fingers on the table. "We need hard data, numbers that don't add up, something they can't explain away." "How do we get that?" "I've got access to the central computer system for security reports. I can run some cross-references, see what turns up." I checked my watch. "I'm off duty tonight. I'll see what I can find." Bush looked relieved, like sharing the burden had lifted some weight off him. "I'm on patrol in Block D tonight. I can do another count, see if there are more discrepancies." "Be careful," I warned. "Don't make it obvious what you're doing." He nodded. "What about Simmons? Should we tell him?" "Not yet. Let me get some solid evidence first, then we'll bring him in." I finished my coffee as people started filing into the mess hall. "We should split up. Don't want anyone getting suspicious." Bush stood up. "Thanks for believing me." "Yeah, well, same to you." We went our separate ways, but my mind was racing. I wasn't alone. Whatever was happening on this ship, others had seen it too. Now I just needed to prove it. My shift that day dragged on forever. I was assigned to the armory, checking weapons in and out for the guards changing shifts. Mindless work that gave me too much time to think about what Bush had told me. 3 more disappearances, 3 more people just vanishing into thin air, and command covering it all up. By the time I got off duty, I had a plan. The central computer terminal in Security Hub 4 was usually empty during 3rd shift. The night supervisor, Corporal Chen, was notorious for taking extended breaks to smoke in the maintenance corridors. If I timed it right, I'd have at least 30 minutes alone with the system. I changed out of my uniform and headed to the mess hall for dinner, making sure people saw me. Then I mentioned loud enough for a few guards to hear that I was exhausted and heading straight to bed. Instead, I doubled back toward Security Hub 4, taking the long way through maintenance corridors to avoid the cameras. Just as I'd hoped, the hub was empty when I arrived. Chen's jacket was draped over his chair, but he was nowhere in sight. Perfect. I slid into the seat at the main terminal and logged in with my security credentials. The system accepted them without question, displaying the standard security dashboard. I navigated to the prisoner manifest system first. The main screen showed the same information it always had. 3,000 prisoners aboard, distributed across 12 cell blocks. But I knew that couldn't be right. Not with what I'd seen. Not with what Bush had seen. I started digging deeper, pulling up different reports and cross-referencing them. Meal distribution records, medical appointments, cell assignments, work detail logs. If prisoners were disappearing, there would be inconsistencies somewhere. It took me about 15 minutes to find the first major red flag. The meal distribution records showed food preparation for only 1,200 prisoners for the past week. I checked the previous week, 1,500. The week before that, 1,800. The numbers were dropping steadily. I kept digging. Medical records showed only 900 prisoners had received their mandatory monthly checkups in the past 30 days. Cell assignment logs showed activity, door openings, light usage, water consumption, for only about 1,000 cells. But the manifest still showed 3,000 prisoners. I started pulling individual prisoner files at random. For every 3 I checked, at least 1 showed no recent activity, No meals, no medical appointments, no cell access logs, despite being listed as present on the ship. These weren't just clerical errors, this was systematic. I heard footsteps in the corridor outside and quickly switched screens. The door slid open and Corporal Chen walked in, smelling of cigarettes. "Alvarez? What are you doing here?" He looked surprised, but not suspicious. "Lieutenant Burke asked me to pull some security footage from Block C," I lied smoothly. "Something about a contraband investigation." Chen nodded, accepting this without question. "Find what you needed?" "Just finishing up." I pretended to transfer some files to my tablet, then logged out of the system. "All yours." He settled into his chair as I headed for the door. "Hey, Alvarez," he called after me. "You heard anything more about that prisoner you said vanished? Medina?" I turned back. "No." "Why?" Chen shrugged. "Just curious. Weird situation." "Yeah," I said carefully. "Weird." I left before he could ask anything else, my mind racing with what I'd discovered. The numbers didn't lie. Hundreds of prisoners were missing from the ship's actual operations, even while the manifest showed them present. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than I'd imagined. I needed to tell Simmons. I found him in the gym the next morning, finishing up his workout. The place was mostly empty, just a couple of techs on the treadmills at the far end. Simmons was bench pressing, his face strained with effort as he pushed the bar up. I walked over and spotted him for his last few reps. "Thanks," he grunted as he racked the weights and sat up. "Didn't expect to see you here this early." "We need to talk," I said quietly. "Somewhere private." Simmons studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "Give me 5 to shower. Meet me in Maintenance Corridor 7B. 20 minutes later, we were standing in the same maintenance corridor where we'd met before. The hum of the ship's engines was louder here, making it harder for anyone to overhear us. "What's going on?" Simmons asked, arms crossed. I told him everything, my conversation with Bush, the disappearances he'd witnessed, and what I'd found in the computer system. "The numbers don't add up, Simmons. Meal prep for 1,200 when we're supposed to have 3,000 prisoners. Medical checks for only 900. Cell activity for about 1,000. I ran a hand through my hair. Prisoners are disappearing, and it's not just 1 or 2, it's hundreds. Simmons was quiet for a long moment. "You're sure about these numbers?" "I saw them myself, pulled them directly from the system." He paced a few steps, thinking. "We need to verify this, a physical count." "How? We can't exactly walk around counting prisoners without someone noticing." "Not during regular shifts, no." Simmons looked at me. "But I'm supervising night patrol in Blocks A through D tomorrow. You're on the roster too. And we do our jobs, but we also count. Every cell, every prisoner. See what the real numbers are." I nodded slowly. "What about the other blocks?" "One step at a time. 4 blocks gives us a third of the ship. If the pattern holds, that'll be enough to prove something's wrong." He paused. "Have you told anyone else about this?" "Just Bush. He's the one who came to me." "Keep it that way for now." Simmons's expression was grim. "If command is covering this up, we need to be careful who we trust." "What do you think is happening to them?" I asked. "The missing prisoners." Simmons shook his head. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it can't be good." The next night, Simmons and I reported for night patrol duty. Lieutenant Burke was there to brief us, along with 4 other guards assigned to different sections of the ship. "Standard patrol protocols," Burke said, barely looking up from her tablet. 2 sweeps per block, log any incidents. Quiet night, so let's keep it that way." She glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "Alvarez, you're with Simmons in Blocks A through D. Stay alert." "Yes, ma'am," I said, keeping my face neutral. As soon as the briefing was over, Simmons and I headed to Block A. The night shift was always quieter, lights dimmed, most prisoners asleep. Perfect for what we needed to do. "I'll take the east side, you take west," Simmons said quietly. "Count every occupied cell. Meet back at the checkpoint in 30. We split up, and I began my count. Walking slowly down the corridor, I checked each cell through the small viewports. Some prisoners were asleep, others sitting on their bunks, a few pacing in the confined space. I kept a running tally on my tablet, disguising it as routine patrol notes. Block A was supposed to have 250 prisoners. I counted 83. I met Simmons at the checkpoint. East side, 79 prisoners, he said without preamble. West side, 83, I replied. Simmons's jaw tightened. That's 162 total. Manifest says 250. Almost 100 missing, I murmured, and that's just one block. We moved on to Block B, then C, then D. In each one, the pattern was the same. Fewer than half the cells that should have been occupied actually contained prisoners. By the end of our shift, we had our count. 4 blocks, supposedly holding 1,000 prisoners according to the manifest. Actual count, 412. We finished our patrol and reported back to Lieutenant Burke that all was quiet. She dismissed us without much interest, and we headed back to the crew quarters. "We need to talk about this," Simmons said once we were alone in the corridor. "Not here. Meet me in the observation deck in 20 minutes. It should be empty this time of night." The observation deck was a small room on the upper level of the ship with a reinforced viewport that looked out into space. It was meant as a stress relief area for the crew, but most people avoided it. Something about staring into the endless void made them uncomfortable. Simmons was already there when I arrived, standing with his back to the stars, arms crossed. "Less than half," he said as soon as the door closed behind me. "Less than half the prisoners are actually on board." "And that's just the blocks we counted," I said. "If the pattern holds across the ship, then we've got fewer than 800 prisoners on a ship that's supposed to be carrying 3,000. Simmons's voice was tight. "And command knows. They have to know." I leaned against the wall, trying to process the implications. "What the hell is going on, Simmons? Where are all these people?" "I don't know." He turned to look out the viewport at the stars streaking by. "But I'm starting to think this isn't a prison transport mission at all." "Then what is it?" He shook his head. "Nothing good." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of our discovery settling over us. Finally, Simmons spoke again. "We need more information, something concrete we can take to someone who will listen." "I can try accessing the system again," I offered. "Dig deeper into the transfer records, see if there's any pattern to who's disappearing and when." "Do it," Simmons nodded. "But be careful. If they catch you snooping around." I know. I didn't need him to finish the thought. We both knew what happened to people who asked too many questions on this ship. The next day, I tried to access the central computer system again during my break. But this time, when I entered my security credentials, the screen flashed red. "Access denied, security clearance revoked." I tried again, thinking maybe I'd entered something wrong. Same result. They knew. Somehow, they knew I'd been digging around in the system. My heart sank as I logged out and left the terminal. This was bad, very bad. I went through the rest of my shift on autopilot, constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to be confronted at any moment. But nothing happened. No one said anything. It was almost worse than being called out, this silent acknowledgement that they were watching me. The next morning, I was summoned to Lieutenant Burke's office. My stomach knotted as I walked there, wondering if this was it, if I was about to disappear like Medina and all those other prisoners. Burke was sitting behind her desk when I entered, reviewing something on her tablet. She didn't look up immediately. "Private Alvarez," she said finally, setting the tablet down. "Have a seat." I sat, keeping my back straight, face neutral. "Lieutenant," she studied me for a long moment. "I understand you've been conducting some unauthorized activities on board." "Ma'am?" "Don't play dumb, Alvarez. It doesn't suit you." Her voice was cold. "Accessing restricted areas of the computer system, conducting unauthorized head counts during night patrol, discussing conspiracy theories with other crew members." So they did know. Everything. I was trying to understand the discrepancies in the prisoner manifest, I said carefully. Several prisoners have gone missing from the system with no explanation. There are no discrepancies, Burke said firmly. Any changes to the manifest are authorized and documented appropriately. With all due respect, Lieutenant, I witnessed a prisoner disappear right in front of me. Private Bush has seen the same thing. And our count last night showed fewer than half the prisoners are actually on board. Burke's expression hardened. I'm going to give you some advice, Private, and I suggest you take it. Stop spreading panic with your conspiracy theories. Stop accessing systems above your clearance level. Stop conducting unauthorized counts. But Lieutenant, this is not a request, Alvarez. She leaned forward. This is your only warning. The Meridian's mission is classified beyond your need to know. If you continue to interfere, there will be consequences. Serious ones. The threat was clear. I clenched my jaw, fighting to keep my expression neutral. Do I make myself clear? Burke asked. Yes, ma'am, I said stiffly. Good. She picked up her tablet again, dismissing me. You're reassigned to the cargo bay for today's shift. Report there immediately. I stood and saluted, then left her office. My mind was racing. Burke hadn't denied anything, not really. She'd just warned me to stop looking, which meant there was definitely something to find, and her words confirmed my worst fears. Whatever was happening to those prisoners, it wasn't a mistake or a glitch in the system. It was deliberate, authorized, part of the mission. I headed to the cargo bay, my resolve hardening with each step. Burke's warning had only convinced me of one thing. We needed to find out what was really happening on the Meridian before we ended up disappearing too. I'd been assigned to processing center duty for 3 days now. Not my favorite post, but at least it was better than Block C. The main processing center was where they brought new arrivals, transfers, and anyone scheduled for medical evaluations. Quieter than the cell blocks, with better lighting. Didn't stink as much either. Today was slow. Just a scheduled transfer of 20 inmates heading to Medical Bay 5 for their monthly checkups. Standard procedure. They'd come through the main chamber, get processed, then move through the adjacent transfer room before heading to medical. I stood at my post by the security console, watching the prisoners file in. Most of them looked like they always did, tired, resigned, shuffling along in their orange jumpsuits. I recognized a few faces. Torres from Cell Block B, the quiet one who kept to himself. Jackson, who'd gotten into that fight last month. And Chen, who always nodded at me when I was on patrol. The processing center itself was all function, no comfort. Metal walls, bright overhead lights, security cameras in every corner. A big reinforced glass window separated my station from the main chamber, giving me a clear view of everything that happened inside. The transfer room was visible through another window to my right, basically a holding area between processing and wherever they were headed next. Corporal Dakota Cole was working the station with me, running the biometric scans as each prisoner came through. Dakota was all right, but we weren't exactly friends. He'd been on the Meridian longer than me, almost 2 years now, and had that detached efficiency that comes with routine. Never seemed bothered by anything. System's running slow today, Dakota muttered, tapping at his console. The holographic display flickered, showing the prisoner manifest alongside the biometric data. Keeps lagging between scans. I nodded, watching as Chen stepped up to the scanner. Been happening a lot lately. Rodriguez said something about server maintenance. Yeah, well, it makes everything take twice as long. Dakota gestured for Chen to place his palm on the scanner. The machine hummed, then beeped confirmation. Next. The prisoners continued through processing one by one. I kept my eyes moving between them, the exits, and the security feeds displayed on my monitor. Standard procedure, nothing unusual. But I couldn't shake this feeling in my gut, this constant unease that had followed me since I'd watched Medina disappear. 4 weeks into the rotation now, and things had only gotten weirder. The ship felt different. Tenser. People weren't talking as much in the mess hall anymore, and when they did, their voices were lower. I'd catch snippets of conversations, missing prisoners, system glitches, odd noises in the night cycle. Then they'd notice me and stop talking. I wasn't the only one who'd seen things either, not anymore. Bush had confirmed that. Simmons too. We'd actually counted, and found hundreds of prisoners missing. But the manifest still showed nearly 3,000 on board. The numbers didn't add up, and nobody in command would acknowledge it. "Last one," Dakota said, breaking into my thoughts. The final prisoner, an older man named Reeves, placed his palm on the scanner. The machine beeped, and Dakota nodded. All 20 accounted for, moving to transfer room. I watched as the group shuffled through the door into the adjacent chamber. The transfer room was smaller than the main processing center, with the same metal walls and bright lights. No furniture, just a holding area with another door on the far side that led to the corridor toward medical. Dakota picked up his tablet. "Sending confirmation to Medical Bay 5 that they're on their way." That's when I heard it. A sound I'd never heard before on the ship, a high-pitched whine almost at the edge of hearing. I looked up, scanning the ceiling for the source. "You hear that?" I asked. Dakota frowned. "Hear what?" The whine grew louder, and now there was no way he couldn't hear it. It was coming from the transfer room. I turned toward the window just as the first scream erupted. It was Torres. He was backing away from the wall, his eyes wide with terror. The other prisoners were turning to look, some of them already moving away, others frozen in confusion. "What the hell?" Dakota stood up, moving to the window. The wall behind Torres was moving. I don't know how else to describe it. The solid metal surface was rippling, like water disturbed by a stone. Torres screamed again, pressing himself against the opposite wall, but it was happening there too. The entire room was coming alive, the metal surfaces undulating like they were made of liquid. "What's happening?" Dakota's voice had risen an octave. "Is this some kind of—" His words cut off as Torres was suddenly yanked backward, as if grabbed by invisible hands. He hit the rippling wall, and instead of colliding with it, he sank into it. The metal flowed around him like quicksand, pulling him in. His scream cut off as his head disappeared into the wall. And then he was gone. Completely gone, like he'd never been there at all. The other prisoners erupted into panic. They were shoving each other, pounding on the doors, screaming for help. But the doors remained locked, standard security protocol during transfers. "Open the doors!" I shouted at Dakota, but he just stood there, frozen, staring at the window. Another prisoner, Jackson, was pulled into the ceiling, the metal flowing around him like water. Chen tried to grab him, but only managed to get pulled in himself. 3 gone in seconds. I slammed my hand down on the emergency alarm. Red lights began flashing throughout the processing center, and the siren wailed. But it wasn't stopping whatever was happening in that room. I tried the door controls, but they wouldn't respond. The system was locked down, emergency protocol. Only command could override it now. "Dakota!" I grabbed his shoulder, shaking him. "Call command now!" He snapped out of it, fumbling for his radio. "This is Processing Center 1. We have an emergency situation. Repeat, emergency in transfer room A." I turned back to the window. The scene inside was pure chaos. Prisoners screaming, crying, praying, and one by one, being consumed by the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The metal surfaces rippled and flowed like living things, reaching out to grab them. Some tried to fight it, clawing at the air as they were pulled in. Others seemed to give up, going limp as the walls took them. Reeves, the older man, stood in the center of the room, oddly calm amidst the panic. He looked directly at me through the window, his eyes resigned. Then the floor beneath him liquefied, and he sank down into it without a struggle, his gaze never leaving mine until he disappeared completely. It couldn't have been more than 2 minutes from start to finish. 20 prisoners gone, consumed by the very structure of the ship itself. And then it was over. The walls solidified, the whining sound faded, and the transfer room was empty. Completely empty. No blood, no signs of struggle, nothing to indicate 20 men had just been there, screaming as they were pulled into solid metal. I stood there, my hand still on the alarm, staring through the window. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This wasn't like Medina. This wasn't one prisoner disappearing in a crowded corridor. This was 20 men, all at once, consumed by the ship itself. Dakota was still on the radio, his voice shaky. "Negative, sir. They're gone. All of them. The walls they just... He looked at me, eyes wide. "You need to see this for yourself." The next few minutes were a blur. The processing center doors slid open, and security teams rushed in, rifles raised. Lieutenant Burke was with them, along with Dr. Riley Scott, the ship's chief medical officer. I'd seen her around but never spoken to her directly. Tall, with dark hair pulled back in a braid, and the kind of calm, clinical expression that gave nothing away. "Report," Burke snapped at me. I tried to keep my voice steady. 20 prisoners were in the transfer room, waiting to be moved to Medical Bay 5. The walls... I paused, knowing how it would sound. The walls became fluid somehow. They pulled the prisoners in, all of them. It took less than 2 minutes. Burke's expression didn't change. "Open the transfer room," she ordered one of the security officers. "Ma'am, I don't think..." I started. "That wasn't a request, Private." The security officer overrode the lockdown and the transfer room door slid open. Dr. Scott went in first, followed by Burke and 2 security officers. I stayed where I was, watching through the window as they examined the room. There was nothing to find. The room was exactly as it always was. Metal walls, floor, and ceiling. No sign of disturbance. No evidence that 20 men had just been swallowed by the structure itself. Dr. Scott ran some kind of handheld scanner over the walls, her expression unreadable. She checked her readings, then did it again. Finally, she turned to Burke and said something I couldn't hear. Burke nodded, then turned and walked back into the processing center. Dr. Scott followed, tucking her scanner into her lab coat pocket. "The transfer room is secure," Burke announced. "Dr. Scott will file her report. The rest of you, back to your posts." I stared at her. "Lieutenant, what about the prisoners? They were just taken by the walls." Burke's eyes met mine, cold and warning. "The prisoners scheduled for medical examination have been successfully transferred, Private Alvarez. That's what Dr. Scott's report will confirm." I looked at Dr. Scott, who was already typing something into her tablet. Her face was completely neutral, professional. "That's not what happened," I said, my voice louder than I intended. "They didn't transfer anywhere. They were consumed by the ship. We all saw it." I gestured to Dakota, who was standing very still beside me. "Corporal Cole," Burke said, ignoring me. "Did you witness any unusual activity during the transfer?" Dakota hesitated, glancing at me. I could see the conflict in his eyes, what he'd seen versus what he was expected to say. "There was a system lag," he said finally. "The biometric scans were running slow. By the time I looked up, the transfer room was empty." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's not true," I said. "You saw exactly what I saw. You were standing right here." Burke stepped closer to me, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Private Alvarez, I suggest you take some time to clear your head. Perhaps you should report to medical for an evaluation." The threat was clear. I'd already been warned once to stop asking questions. This was escalation. Dr. Scott finished whatever she was typing and looked up. "I've filed my report. The prisoners have been successfully transferred to Medical Bay 5. There were no irregularities." She said it with such clinical certainty that for a second I almost doubted myself. Had I imagined the whole thing? The screams, the rippling metal, the men being pulled into solid walls? No, I'd seen it. Dakota had seen it too, even if he was too scared to admit it now. The security teams filed out, followed by Burke. Dr. Scott lingered, her amber eyes studying me with what might have been curiosity or concern. It was hard to tell. "Private," she said quietly. "Sometimes the mind plays tricks when we're under stress. Perhaps you should get some rest." And then she was gone too, leaving just me and Dakota in the processing center. The emergency lights had stopped flashing and the alarm had been silenced. Everything looked normal again, except for the empty transfer room. Dakota wouldn't meet my eyes. "We should reset the system for the next group," he said, as if nothing had happened. "Are you serious right now?" I moved to stand in front of him. 20 men just disappeared, and you're going to pretend you didn't see it? He finally looked at me, his expression a mix of fear and resignation. "What I saw doesn't matter, Alvarez. What matters is what goes in the official report." He lowered his voice. "You've been poking around, asking questions. People are noticing. Don't make yourself a target." "A target for what? We're supposed to be running a prison transport, not..." I gestured at the transfer room. Whatever the hell that was. Dakota just shook his head and turned back to his console. The conversation was over. I stood there for a moment longer, trying to process what had just happened. Not just the prisoners disappearing, but the immediate cover-up. Dr. Scott filing a false report without hesitation. Burke threatening me. Dakota denying what he'd clearly seen. This wasn't just about missing prisoners anymore. This was something much bigger, much worse, and everyone in command seemed to be in on it. My shift ended 3 hours later. Dakota barely spoke to me the whole time, focusing intently on his work. We processed 2 more groups without incident, smaller batches of 5 or 6 prisoners each. Every time they entered the transfer room, I tensed up, waiting for the walls to start rippling again. But nothing happened. When my replacement arrived, I headed straight for the mess hall. I needed to find Simmons or Bush, needed to tell them what I'd seen. But the mess hall had a different feel to it when I walked in. People were sitting in smaller groups than usual, heads bent close, voices low. Conversations stopped when others walked past. The usual background noise of clattering trays and casual chatter was muted, replaced by a tense silence broken only by whispers. I grabbed a tray and went through the line, barely noticing what food I was putting on it. My mind was still in that transfer room, still seeing Torres sink into the wall, still hearing the screams. Simmons wasn't there. Neither was Bush. I spotted a few people I knew from my rotation, but they were sitting with others, engaged in those same hushed conversations. I took a seat at an empty table near the back of the room. I wasn't hungry, but I forced myself to eat anyway. As I did, I started to catch snippets of the conversations around me. "Third incident this week. Heard it was equipment malfunction. Classified, but Martinez told me. Executing them has to be." The theories were flying. Equipment malfunctions, secret executions. Some kind of experimental teleportation gone wrong. No one seemed to know for sure, but everyone was talking about it. The disappearances weren't a secret anymore, not really, just officially denied. I finished my meal and was about to leave when someone sat down across from me. It was a technician named Patel who worked in engineering. I'd spoken to her a few times, nothing beyond casual conversation. "Heard you were on duty and processing today," she said without preamble, her voice low. I nodded, cautious. "Yeah. 20 at once, right? That's what they're saying." I glanced around, making sure no one was listening too closely. "Who's saying that?" Patel shrugged. "People talk. Word gets around." She leaned forward slightly. "Was it like the others? Did they just vanish?" So she knew. How many others did too? "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, keeping my expression neutral. After what happened with Dakota, I wasn't about to trust anyone I didn't know well. Patel studied me for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Smart. Keep it that way." She stood up. "Just watch yourself, Alvarez. Things are getting worse." She walked away, leaving me with an even stronger sense of unease. Things are getting worse. That was an understatement. I returned my tray and headed out, planning to find Simmons in the gym where he usually worked out during this shift. But as I was walking down the main corridor of Deck 4, the ship-wide announcement system crackled to life. "Attention all personnel. This is Captain Dixon, emergency assembly in Hangar Bay 2 at 0800 hours tomorrow. Attendance is mandatory. Repeat, mandatory attendance for all personnel not on essential duty. That is all. I stopped walking. In the 5 weeks I'd been on the Meridian, there had never been a ship-wide assembly. Never. Something big was happening. I changed course, heading for Maintenance Corridor 7B, where I hoped to find Simmons. We needed to compare notes before that assembly tomorrow. Whatever the captain was going to announce, I had a feeling it wasn't going to be good news. The corridor was empty when I arrived. I waited for nearly 20 minutes, but Simmons never showed. Eventually, I gave up and headed back to my quarters. I'd try to find him in the morning, before the assembly. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that transfer room, saw the walls rippling like water, saw Torres being pulled in. I heard the screams, saw Reeves looking directly at me as the floor swallowed him whole. And underneath it all was the growing certainty that whatever was happening on this ship, it wasn't going to end well for any of us. Morning came, and with it the assembly. I still hadn't found Simmons or Bush. It was like they'd disappeared too, though I told myself they were probably just on duty somewhere. The Meridian was a big ship. It was easy to miss people for days at a time if your schedules didn't align. Hangar Bay 2 was massive, large enough to hold most of the ship's personnel. It was packed when I arrived, people standing shoulder to shoulder, an anxious murmur filling the air. I squeezed through the crowd, trying to spot anyone I knew, but there were too many people. A makeshift platform had been set up at one end of the hangar. As I watched, Captain Dixon stepped onto it, followed by Lieutenant Burke and several other senior officers. Dr. Scott was there too, standing slightly apart from the others. The captain looked terrible. His uniform was immaculate as always, but his face was drawn, with dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Maybe he hadn't. The murmuring died down as he stepped up to the microphone. For a moment, he just stood there, looking out at the assembled crew. Then he took a deep breath. As of 0600 hours this morning, all prisoners aboard the Meridian have been officially classified as missing. The words hit like a physical blow. All prisoners, not just the ones I'd seen disappear, not just the ones Simmons, Bush, and I had counted missing. All of them. All 3,000. The hangar erupted into noise, gasps, questions, exclamations of disbelief. Dixon held up his hand for silence, and gradually the noise died down. I understand this is shocking news. It is unprecedented. His voice faltered slightly on the word. The circumstances of their disappearance are classified. What I can tell you is that the Meridian has been designated as a no-return vessel, effective immediately. No return. The term sent a chill through me. It meant exactly what it sounded like. We weren't going back. Ever. We are now operating under Protocol 7, Dixon continued, his voice steadier now. For those unfamiliar with emergency protocols, this means we will continue on our current trajectory indefinitely. All communication with Earth Command has been suspended. The mission parameters have changed. The fear in the hangar was palpable now. People were looking at each other, whispering urgently. Protocol 7 wasn't just an emergency measure. It was a last resort. The kind of protocol that only got activated when something had gone catastrophically wrong. I know you have questions, Dixon said. I don't have all the answers. What I can tell you is that we are not in immediate danger. The ship is functioning normally, but we cannot return to Earth or any colony world. Not now. Possibly not ever. He paused, letting that sink in. Not ever. We were stranded in deep space, on a ship where prisoners were being consumed by the walls, and we couldn't go home. Department heads will brief their teams on new assignments and protocols, Dixon said. Until then, maintain your regular duties, that is all. He stepped back from the microphone. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. The silence in the hangar was absolute, heavy with shock and fear. Then Dixon turned and walked off the platform, followed by the other officers. Only Dr. Scott remained, her eyes scanning the crowd with that same unreadable expression. As people began to move, began to talk, I stood frozen in place. I'd known something was wrong on this ship. I'd seen it with my own eyes. But this was beyond anything I'd imagined. All the prisoners were gone. And now, so were we. I couldn't move. Everyone around me was shifting, whispering, some shouting questions, but I stood there frozen like my boots had melted into the metal floor of the hangar. My mind kept replaying Dixon's words. "We're not going home, soldier. This ship is now our permanent assignment." Permanent. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. I watched Dixon's face as he said it, no emotion, just stating a fact, like telling us the weather. The crowd got louder. Johnson from engineering was yelling something about contracts. Martinez had his hands on his head. A few people were pushing forward toward the platform where Dixon and the other officers stood. "That's bullshit," someone shouted from the back. "You can't do that," called another voice. Dixon raised his hand, and the noise died down a bit. Not out of respect, out of shock, I think. "I understand this is difficult news," he said. His voice was calm, measured. "But these are our orders from Fleet Command." More shouting erupted. I looked around for Simmons or Bush, but couldn't spot them in the crowd. The faces around me showed everything from rage to disbelief to blank shock. Chambers, a navigation specialist I'd talked to maybe twice, stood next to me with tears running down her face. Dr. Scott stepped forward on the platform. She waited for the noise to subside, which took a minute. When she spoke, her voice was clinical, detached. "The navigation systems have been locked by Fleet Command," she said. "We no longer have the ability to make course corrections or return to inhabited space." That set off another wave. Someone threw something, looked like a ration bar, that fell short of the platform. Security personnel moved in closer to the officers. "We're heading into uncharted territory," Dr. Scott continued. "The Meridian will maintain its current trajectory indefinitely." Indefinitely. Another word that hit like a punch to the gut. "What about our families?" someone called out. Dixon looked in that direction but didn't really answer. "Fleet Command has made provisions." Provisions? What the hell did that even mean? People started pushing forward again. I saw Corporal Reyes grab Specialist Wong by the arm when Wong lunged toward the platform. The officers were already backing away, heading for the exit behind them. Only Dr. Scott remained, watching us with those unreadable eyes. I needed to move, to find Simmons and Bush. We needed to figure out what was happening, what we could do. But my legs wouldn't work right away. My mind was stuck on one thought. Kepler 442 wasn't real. Or at least, we were never going there. The realization hit me hard. The prisoners weren't meant to serve sentences. They were meant to disappear. And now, so were we. I finally got my feet to move and pushed through the crowd. People were breaking off into groups now, some shouting, some silent with shock. A few were heading for the exits, probably to their stations or quarters to process what was happening. I spotted Bush first. He was standing against the far wall, face pale, eyes wide. I made my way over to him. "Bush," I said. Had to say it twice before he looked at me. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "Did you fucking hear that?" "Yeah, I heard." "They can't do this," he said. His voice was shaking. "They can't just, we have rights. We have families." I didn't know what to say to that. Legally, yeah, we had rights. But out here, with the nav system locked and comms probably cut, our rights didn't mean much. "We need to find Simmons," I said. Bush nodded, seeming grateful for any kind of direction. We pushed through the dispersing crowd, scanning faces. The hangar was starting to empty as people drifted off in states of shock or anger. We found Simmons near the main doors. He was talking intensely with Specialist Chen from Communications. When he saw us, he gave Chen a quick nod and turned to us. "Alvarez, Bush." His voice was steady, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "You heard?" "We heard," I said. "What do we do?" Simmons glanced around, then motioned us to move away from the main flow of people. We stepped into a maintenance alcove where the noise was slightly less. "We need to get to communications," he said. "Chen says all external comms are down, but she's going to try to help me access the emergency channels." "You think we can call for help?" Bush asked. Simmons's expression was grim. "Worth a try, but don't get your hopes up. If they've locked navigation, they've probably cut all outside contact too." "Why would they do this?" Bush asked, his voice cracking a little. "Why us? What did we do?" I thought about all the prisoners we'd watched disappear, how the system erased them like they'd never existed, how Command covered it up, made us think we were crazy for noticing. "We didn't do anything," I said. "We're just expendable." Simmons gave me a sharp look. "Keep that kind of talk quiet for now. We don't need panic." He was right, but that didn't make it less true. I nodded. "Meet me in Maintenance 7B in 2 hours," Simmons said. "I'll see what I can find out from communications first." We split up after that. Bush headed back to his quarters, looking like he might be sick. I should have gone with him, maybe, but I had something else I needed to check. I walked through the corridors toward Block C. The ship felt different now. Crew members moved with urgent steps or stood in small groups, talking in low voices. The normal routine was breaking down. I passed Lieutenant Burke in Corridor 5. She was walking briskly, tablet in hand, looking straight ahead. Business as usual. Her face showed nothing. No shock, no anger, no fear. I wondered if she'd known all along. Block C was quiet. Most of the security detail had been at the announcement. The few guards on duty looked tense, watching the prisoners with new wariness. The prisoners seemed to sense something, too. They were quieter than normal, observing us from behind their barriers. I reached the security station and nodded to Private Collins, who was on duty. "Alvarez," he acknowledged. His eyes were red-rimmed. "You hear the news?" "Yeah." "My kid's first birthday is next month," he said, his voice flat. I was supposed to be there. I didn't know what to say to that. "I'm sorry," felt inadequate. Collins shook his head. "What do you need?" "Just checking the prisoner manifest," I said. It was a weak excuse, but Collins didn't seem to care. He stepped aside to let me access the console. I pulled up the manifest for Block C. The numbers showed 750 prisoners present. But looking through the viewports at the cells, I could see maybe 100, if that. The pattern was continuing. The system said one thing, reality showed another. I logged off without saying anything else to Collins. He was staring at a photo on his tablet, probably his kid. I walked through the other blocks doing quick visual counts. Block D, system said 800, reality maybe 150. Block B, system said 700, reality about 120. Block A, system said 750, reality no more than 100. The math was clear. Out of the supposed 3,000 prisoners on board, fewer than 500 actually existed. The rest had already disappeared, consumed by the ship or whatever was happening to them. And now we were on the same path. 2 hours later, I met Simmons in Maintenance Corridor 7B, as planned. Bush wasn't there. "Couldn't find him," Simmons said when I asked. Checked his quarters, mess hall, gym. Nothing. That wasn't a good sign, but I pushed the worry aside for now. "Any luck with communications?" I asked. Simmons leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Nothing. Chen got me access, but all external channels are dead. No signal going out, nothing coming in. We're completely cut off." I wasn't surprised, but hearing it confirmed still hit hard. "What about navigation?" I asked. "Locked tight. Trajectory is fixed. We're heading out of the system, away from any colonies or stations." I nodded slowly. "So we're just disappearing, like the prisoners." Simmons didn't argue this time. "Looks that way." We stood in silence for a moment. The hum of the ship's systems seemed louder than usual in the empty corridor. The prisoners, I said finally. I checked the blocks. There's less than 500 left. The system still shows 3,000. Simmons rubbed his face. He looked tired. Whatever's happening to them is going to happen to us. But what is happening to them? They're just gone. The walls moved. They got pulled in somehow. I don't know, Simmons admitted. But I think we need to find out fast if we want any chance of stopping it. We made plans to meet again later after Simmons tried to access the ship's design specifications. If we could understand how the Meridian was built, maybe we could figure out what was happening. I headed to the mess hall after that, needed to eat something, try to think clearly. The hall was about half full. The mood was subdued, tense. People sat in tight groups, talking quietly or not talking at all. I grabbed a tray of whatever they were serving, didn't even look at it, and found an empty table in the corner. Lieutenant Burke entered while I was picking at my food. She walked through the room, posture perfect, face composed. She got her meal and sat with two other officers. They talked normally, ate normally, like nothing had changed. It made my blood boil. Did she know? Had she always known? I remembered how quickly she dismissed my reports, how she'd reassigned me when I kept pushing. Yeah, she knew. I was about to get up, maybe do something stupid like confront her, when Private Jimenez sat down across from me. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform rumpled. "Hey," he said. I nodded in greeting. "You hear about Deck 8? He asked, leaning forward. "No. What about it?" "It's sealed off. Complete lockdown. Nobody in or out." I frowned. "Since when?" "Since the announcement. Right after. Security teams went in, then the whole deck was locked down." That was weird. Deck 8 was mostly crew quarters and some recreation areas. Why seal it off? "Anyone know why?" I asked. Jimenez shook his head. "Maintenance issue, they're saying. But Chen from communications was quartered there, so was Bush." My stomach tightened. Bush wasn't at our meeting. No one could find him. "Thanks," I said to Jimenez. "I need to go." I dumped my tray and left the mess hall, heading for Deck 8. I needed to see for myself. As I approached the main access point, I saw the security barrier was up. 2 guards stood at attention, rifles ready. I recognized Michaels, who I'd trained with back on Earth. "Michaels," I called as I approached. "What's going on?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Restricted area, Alvarez. Can't let anyone through." "Why? What happened?" Michaels glanced at the other guard, then back at me. "Maintenance issue. Should be resolved soon." The same line Jimenez had heard. I didn't buy it. "Is Bush in there? Private Austin Bush? He's my friend." Michael's expression changed slightly, a flicker of something. Pity, maybe. "Can't discuss personnel," he said formally. "You need to move along, Alvarez." I stood my ground. "Michaels, come on. We trained together. Just tell me if he's okay." The other guard stepped forward. "You heard him. Restricted area. Move along, or we'll report you." I looked at Michaels again, but his face had gone blank. Professional. I turned and walked away, my mind racing. Something had happened on Deck 8, something they weren't telling us. I spent the next few hours trying to find out more. No one had any real information, just rumors. Some said there'd been a malfunction. Others said people had tried to access restricted systems. A few whispered about a suicide, but no names were mentioned. I couldn't find Simmons again, couldn't find Bush, couldn't get any straight answers from anyone in authority. So I went back to my quarters, sat on my bunk, stared at the wall, and I started writing. I don't know if anyone will ever read this. Probably not. But I need to document what's happening, what I've seen, what I know. The Meridian wasn't built as a prison transport. Not really. It was designed to make people disappear. The prisoners were just the first wave. Now it's our turn. I don't know why they chose us. Maybe we saw too much. Maybe we asked too many questions. Or maybe we were always meant to vanish right from the start. I'm writing this on my personal tablet. I've disconnected it from the ship's network. Not sure if that will help, but it feels safer somehow. I'm recording everything I've witnessed, everything I know about the disappearances. The way the walls moved, the way the system erased people from the records, the way command covered it all up. 3 hours ago, I tried to find Simmons again. No luck. His quarters were empty. No one had seen him since our meeting. I checked the manifest. It still listed him as on duty, assigned to Block D. I went there. He wasn't there. The guards said he never showed up for his shift. Just like the prisoners. Here 1 minute, gone the next. Erased. I went back to my quarters and kept writing. What else could I do? An hour ago, there was an announcement. Captain Dixon's voice, calm and controlled. Attention, all personnel. Effective immediately, all crew members are to report to their assigned stations and remain on standard duty rotations. Any disruption to ship operations will result in immediate disciplinary action. That is all. Business as usual, like we hadn't just been told we were never going home. I finished my documentation and saved it. Then I copied it to a separate file, hid it in the tablet system. Just in case. Now I'm sitting here, waiting for my next shift. It starts in 20 minutes. Block A prisoner count. Not that it matters anymore. The numbers are fiction. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I'll disappear like the others. I don't know if anyone will fight back, or if we'll all just accept our fate. All I know is that the meridian keeps moving forward, taking us farther from home with every second, and one by one, we're vanishing. I check the time. 15 minutes until my shift. I should put on my uniform, get ready, pretend everything's normal. But nothing is normal anymore. Nothing will ever be normal again. I get up anyway, put on my uniform, check my appearance in the small mirror. I look the same, but everything has changed. I pick up my tablet, tuck it away safely. Then I head out to count prisoners who aren't there, on a ship that's taking us nowhere. I've been studying the disappearances for 2 weeks now, keeping track of every vanishing, every empty cell, every face that's there 1 minute and gone the next. I'm not sleeping much anymore. What's the point? Every time I close my eyes, I see Medina stretching into nothing, or those 20 prisoners getting sucked into the walls. The pattern's there if you look for it. Most disappearances happen during transfers, moving from one block to another, going to medical, returning from the mess hall, and they happen in clusters, 5 here, 10 there, never just one at a time anymore. I flip through my notes on the tablet. I've been documenting everything, hiding the files under maintenance reports nobody ever reads. Block C lost 8 prisoners last Thursday. Block D lost 12 on Monday. The processing center, 20 in one go. The numbers are getting bigger, and now it's not just prisoners. Chen from communications, Bush, 6 others from Deck 8, gone. I check my watch, 2,300 hours. The ship's running on night cycle now, corridors dimmed to 60%. Most of the crew is either sleeping or at their stations. Perfect timing. I tuck the tablet into my jacket and step into the corridor. If I'm right about this, I probably won't make it back. But somebody needs to know what's happening. Somebody needs to see. Transfer Corridor B connects Block C to the recreation area. It's one of the hot spots. I've logged 3 separate disappearances there. The corridor is empty now, just the low hum of the ventilation system and the soft blue glow of the emergency lights along the floor. I pause at the entrance, hand hovering over the door panel. This is stupid. This is suicide. But what choice do I have? Wait around until it's my turn to disappear? I press my palm to the panel, and the door slides open with a soft hiss. The corridor stretches about 50 feet ahead, featureless except for the lighting panels and a single security camera mounted in the corner. I step inside, and the door closes behind me with a solid click. I move to the center of the corridor and stop. This is where it happened last time, where Torres disappeared, right here. I take a deep breath and wait. Nothing happens. Maybe I need to trigger it somehow. The disappearances always happen during movement, during transfers. I pace the length of the corridor, back and forth, keeping my eyes on the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Still nothing. I stop again, frustrated. What am I missing? The pattern. There's always a pattern. The disappearances happen during transfers, yes, but they also happen at specific times. I check my notes again. 0700 hours, 1300 hours, 1900 hours. The times when the ship's systems run diagnostics, when power fluctuates. I check my watch. 23:15 hours. Not a diagnostic time. I need to wait until 0100 hours. The next system check. I sit with my back against the wall, legs stretched out in front of me. I should have brought water or a snack. The minutes tick by slowly. I try not to think about what I'm doing, about what might happen when the clock hits 0100. I try not to think about Medina or Torres or Bush. Instead, I think about home, about Earth, about my apartment in San Diego with the crappy air conditioning and the view of the neighbor's brick wall. I think about my sister and her kids, about the messages I won't be sending anymore, about all the things I should have said before I left. My watch beeps, 0100 hours. I stand up, heart pounding. Nothing looks different. The corridor is the same as it was an hour ago. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the light changes, just slightly. A flicker, like someone turned the dimmer down a notch and then back up. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been staring right at it. And then I feel it. A vibration. Not in the floor or the walls, but in the air itself. Like the molecules are shaking, rearranging themselves. I pull out my sidearm, the weight of it reassuring in my hand. Not that it'll do much good against whatever this is, but it makes me feel better. The vibration increases, and now I can see it. The wall to my left isn't solid anymore. It's shifting, rippling like water, like it's breathing. Holy shit, I whisper. The ripples spread, moving across the wall in waves, and then the wall begins to bulge outward, reaching toward me. I back away, but there's nowhere to go. The door behind me is sealed for the night cycle. I'm trapped. The bulge extends further, forming a shape that's almost like an arm, a hand, reaching for me. I raise my weapon, but hesitate. What am I supposed to shoot? It's the wall itself that's moving. The hand-like protrusion is only a few feet away now. I can see details forming in it. Fingers, a palm. It's not metal anymore. It's something else, something alive. And then I feel it. A pull. Not physical, but something deeper. Like it's tugging at my insides, at my very atoms, trying to pull me apart. The sensation is familiar. It's what I felt that day in the processing center, right before the prisoners disappeared. But weaker, like it's just getting started. The hand is almost touching me now. I can't move. The pull is too strong, freezing me in place. This is it. This is how I disappear. In a burst of desperation, I raise my weapon and fire. The shot is deafening in the enclosed space, the muzzle flash blinding. The bullet hits the hand thing and passes through it like it's made of jelly. But something happens. The pulling sensation stops. The hand recoils, the ripples reversing direction, flowing back toward the wall. I fire again and again. 3 shots total, each one pushing the thing back further until the wall solidifies again, returning to normal. I'm gasping for breath, my ears ringing from the gunshots. Did I stop it or just delay it? I don't get time to find out. The door at the end of the corridor slides open, and Lieutenant Burke charges in with 2 security officers, weapons drawn. "Drop the weapon, Alvarez!" she shouts. I let the gun fall from my hand. It clatters to the floor. "What the hell are you doing?" Burke demands, approaching cautiously. The security officers flank her, their weapons trained on me. "Lieutenant," I say, my voice shaking, "you need to see this. The wall was—" "I know what the wall was doing," she interrupts, and something in her tone makes me stop. She knows. Burke turns to the security officers. Wait outside. Lock it down. No one in or out. They hesitate, exchanging glances. Now, Burke says, her voice leaving no room for argument. They back out, and the door closes behind them. Burke holsters her weapon and walks over to the wall I shot at. She runs her hand over the surface. It looks completely normal now. Smooth metal with no sign of the distortion I saw. How long have you known? She asks without turning around. I stare at her back, trying to process what's happening. About the disappearances since Medina, about what's causing them, I just figured it out. She nods, still facing the wall. And you decided to what? Confront it? With a standard issue sidearm? I needed to see it for myself, to understand. Burke turns to face me. Her expression isn't what I expected. There's no anger there, no military discipline, just exhaustion and fear. Did you get what you came for? She asks. I think so. The ship is consuming people. Somehow, it's alive. Burke sighs and walks over to me. She pulls out her tablet and taps a few commands. Then she hands it to me. Project Void, she says. Classified level 9. I've been gathering data for months. I take the tablet and look at the screen. It's filled with technical specifications, mission parameters, crew reports, things I shouldn't have access to, things Burke shouldn't have access to. How did you get this? I was security chief on the station where they built this thing. I knew something was wrong from the beginning. The design specs didn't make sense. The power requirements were off the charts, and then crew started disappearing during test runs. I scroll through the documents, trying to make sense of the technical jargon. What is it? What's happening to the people who disappear? Burke takes the tablet back and pulls up a specific file. A schematic of the Meridian, but like nothing I've seen before. The outer hull is standard, but the interior is a maze of systems I don't recognize. And at the core, something labeled simply as Void Drive. The Meridian isn't just a prison transport, Burke says. It's an experimental vessel designed to harvest energy from living beings for interstellar travel. I stare at the schematic, the words not making sense at first. Harvest energy? You mean the ship is consuming them, converting their mass into energy to fuel itself? The horror of it hits me all at once. 3,000 prisoners, 800 crew, all of us, just fuel. Why? I ask, the word barely audible. Interstellar travel requires enormous amounts of energy, more than conventional systems can provide. The Void Drive uses a different approach. It converts mass directly into energy, specifically living mass. That's murder. Burke's expression hardens. It's worse than that. It's systematic genocide disguised as a prison transport mission. Most of the prisoners on board were political dissidents, refugees, people who fell through the cracks of the system, people no one would miss. I think about the faces I've seen through the cell viewports. Ordinary people, most of them, not hardened criminals, just people who ended up on the wrong side of the law or the wrong side of someone powerful. And the crew? I ask. What about us? Expendable, Burke says simply. Once the prisoners are gone, we're next. The ship needs to keep feeding. My mind is racing, trying to process everything. Does the captain know? Dixon? Burke's expression tells me everything. Dixon is part of it. He's been overseeing the whole operation from the beginning. And you've been gathering evidence. To what? Expose them? Initially, yes. I thought if I could get the data back to Earth, someone would care, someone would stop it. She laughs bitterly. But that was before Dixon's announcement, before I realized we're never going back. I remember Dixon's words in the hangar. The ship is now a no-return vessel. We're on a one-way trip to nowhere. So what now? I ask. We just wait to be consumed? Burke steps closer, lowering her voice even though we're alone. No, We fight back. The ship might be alive in some way, but it's still a machine. It has systems, protocols, ways to control it. How? The navigation's locked. Communications are down. The navigation is locked, yes, but the central processing core isn't, not completely. The void drive needs oversight, needs direction. Someone has to tell it who to consume next, when to feed. I see where she's going with this. And if we can access that system, we might be able to override it, regain control of navigation, maybe even shut down the void drive entirely. Hope flickers inside me, small but persistent. Can we do that? Access the core? Not alone. We need help. Specific skills. Burke begins counting off on her fingers. Simmons has combat experience and knows the security protocols. Dr. Scott has access to the medical bay, which connects directly to the core through the diagnostic systems. Scott, can we trust her? Burke hesitates. I'm not sure, but she was asking questions before anyone else. About the missing prisoners, about the medical scans that didn't make sense. I think she was kept in the dark about the true nature of the project. Anyone else? We need someone from engineering, someone who understands the ship's systems. I think about the people I know in engineering. Most of them are too by the book, too loyal to command, except Johnson, I suggest. He was pretty vocal at the assembly, and he's got the skills. Burke nods. Johnson could work. We'll approach him carefully. What about Bush? He was helping us before he disappeared. A flash of something crosses Burke's face. Guilt, regret. I don't think Bush disappeared the same way the others did. I think Dixon had him removed. Him and the others from Decade. They were asking too many questions. The implication settles heavily between us. Removed how? I don't know for sure, but there's an isolation block on Deck 10. Heavily secured. No access without direct authorization from Dixon. So Bush might still be alive? Possibly. And if he is, we'll need to get him out. He knows things about the communication systems that could help us. I take a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. Okay. So we need to recruit Simmons, Scott, and Johnson. Access the central processing core, override the navigation lock, and maybe rescue Bush and the others from Deck 10. When I say it all together like that, it sounds impossible. Suicidal. Burke must see the doubt on my face. It's a long shot, she admits, but it's the only shot we have. She's right. We're dead anyway if we do nothing. At least this way, we go down fighting. When do we start? I ask. Now. Tonight. We don't have much time. The disappearances are accelerating, which means the ship is ramping up for something, some kind of jump or acceleration. How do you know? Burke pulls up another file on her tablet, a graph showing energy consumption over time. The line starts low and steady, then begins to climb in a steep curve. The void drive is building power. For what, I don't know, but I don't think we want to find out. I nod, a new determination settling over me. So what's the first step? We split up. I'll approach Scott. You find Simmons and fill him in. Then we meet in Medical Bay 3 at Oro 300 hours. It's one of the few areas without constant surveillance. And Johnson? We'll bring him in after we have a solid plan. Too many moving parts right now. Burke picks up my discarded weapon and hands it back to me. Keep this close, and be careful who you talk to. We don't know who else might be involved. I check the magazine, still half full. What about the security team outside? Leave them to me. I'll tell them you were conducting an unauthorized weapons test. They won't question it. She turns to leave, then stops. Alvarez, what you did tonight was stupid, reckless, but it might have just given us the opening we needed. I'm not sure how to respond to that, so I just nod. Burke heads to the door, then pauses again. One more thing. If I don't show up at Medical Bay 3, don't wait for me. Take what you know to Simmons and keep going with the plan. Before I can ask what she means, she's gone. the door sliding shut behind her. I stand alone in the corridor, looking at the wall that had reached for me. That had almost consumed me. Somewhere inside this ship, hundreds of people have already disappeared into those walls, been converted into energy to fuel this nightmare. I check my watch. 01:30 hours. 90 minutes to find Simmons and get to Medical Bay 3. 90 minutes to prepare for the most dangerous mission of my life. I holster my weapon and head for the door, my mind already mapping out the quickest route to Simmons' quarters. Every second counts now, and we're running out of time. I pop my head out of the maintenance hatch, checking the corridor. Empty. Good. Clear, I whisper, sliding out and signaling behind me. Simmons emerges next, then Burke, followed by Dr. Scott. We've been moving through the maintenance tunnels for what feels like hours, narrow, dimly lit passages that run between decks. They're meant for repair crews, not for 4 people trying to navigate the length of a prison transport ship. But right now, they're our only option. How much further? Burke asks, keeping her voice low. I check the schematic on my tablet. 2 more junctions, then we drop down to Deck 4. Core access is through engineering. Anyone need water? Simmons offers his canteen. Nobody takes him up on it. We've been planning this since Burke found me in Transfer Corridor B. The ship's core, where the void drive is housed, is our target. If we can shut it down, or at least override the navigation systems, we might have a chance of getting back to inhabited space. But that means getting past Dixon's security teams, who've been patrolling the main corridors in force since the announcement. Movement, Simmons says suddenly, freezing in place. We all go still. I strain my ears but don't hear anything. Then I see it. Not in the corridor, but in the wall itself. A slight ripple, like someone dropped a pebble in a pond. The metal bulges outward, forming what looks almost like fingers. Back, I hiss, pulling Dr. Scott away from the wall. Everyone back. The bulge grows larger, stretching toward us. Burke draws her sidearm, but I grab her wrist. Don't, I whisper. Gunshots will bring security. Just move. We retreat down the corridor, watching as the wall continues to ripple and shift. After about 20 feet, the movement stops, and the wall returns to normal. It's getting worse, Dr. Scott says quietly. The ship is hungry. That's how Scott explained it to Burke, who explained it to me. The void drive doesn't just consume energy, it consumes people, converts them into the energy needed for interstellar travel. And the longer we're out here, the more aggressive it becomes in seeking new sources. Let's keep moving, I say. Stick to the center of the corridor. We continue our careful progress through the maintenance tunnels. I take point, with Simmons bringing up the rear. Burke and Scott stay between us. Neither of them are combat trained. Burke's an officer, but her experience is administrative, and Scott's a doctor. Simmons and I are the only ones with actual combat experience. At the next junction, I hold up my hand, stopping the group. The schematic shows we need to go left, but I can hear something from that direction. Voices. Security patrol, I whisper. Can we go around? Burke asks. I check the tablet again. No, but there's an access shaft we can use to drop down to the next level. It's about 30 feet back. We retrace our steps, finding the narrow vertical shaft I spotted on the schematic. It's barely wide enough for one person, with metal rungs embedded in the wall. I'll go first, I say, holstering my weapon and swinging into the shaft. The rungs are cold and slightly slick with condensation. I descend slowly, careful not to make noise. About 15 feet down, I reach the access panel for the next level. I work the panel loose and peek through. Another maintenance corridor, empty. I slide through the opening and signal for the others to follow. One by one, they make their way down. Simmons comes last, replacing the access panel above us. Where are we? He asks. Deck 5, I say, consulting the tablet. We need to go down one more level to reach engineering. Why don't we just go straight to the core? Burke asks. Wouldn't that be faster? Core access is restricted, Dr. Scott explains. The only way in is through engineering or the bridge, and I'm guessing the bridge isn't an option. She's right. Dixon hasn't left the bridge since the announcement. He's holed up there with his most trusted officers, controlling the ship's systems and monitoring everything. Engineering it is, I say. This way. We move through the new corridor, which is wider than the one above. Pipes run along the ceiling, carrying coolant to various systems throughout the ship. The lighting here is better too, which makes me nervous. Easier to see means easier to be seen. "Hold up," Simmons says suddenly. "You hear that?" We all stop and listen. At first, I don't hear anything. Then I catch it, a faint humming sound, growing louder. "What is that?" Burke asks. "Diagnostic scan," Dr. Scott says. "The ship runs them automatically every few hours." The humming grows louder, and I notice the lights flickering slightly. Then, about 20 feet ahead of us, the wall begins to ripple again. "Back!" I order, more urgently this time. "Different route." We turn and head in the opposite direction, moving quickly but quietly. The humming follows us, and when I glance back, I see the ripple effect spreading along the wall, keeping pace with us. "It's following us," Burke says, her voice tight with fear. "In here," I say, spotting a maintenance closet. I yank the door open and usher everyone inside, then pull the door shut behind us. The closet is cramped, barely big enough for the four of us. Tools hang on one wall, and shelves stacked with spare parts take up another. We stand in silence, listening as the humming passes by outside. After a full minute, I crack the door open and peek out. The corridor is empty, the walls solid again. "Clear," I whisper. "But we need to move fast. That thing could come back." We exit the closet and continue down the corridor, moving as quickly as we dare while still maintaining silence. At the end of the corridor, we find another vertical shaft, this one leading down to Deck 4. The descent is quicker this time, everyone moving with more urgency. When we reach Deck 4, I find we're in a wider service corridor that runs parallel to engineering. According to the schematic, there should be an access door about 50 feet ahead. "Almost there," I say, leading the way. We reach the access door, and I try the handle. Locked. I pull out my security card and swipe it through the reader. The light stays red. "They've changed the access codes," Burke says. "Dixon must have locked down all critical areas." "Dr. Scott," I turn to her. "Any ideas?" She steps forward, examining the door panel. "I might be able to bypass it, but I'll need time." "How much time?" 5 minutes, maybe less if I'm lucky. I look at Simmons, who nods. "We'll keep watch," he says. "You work your magic, Doc." Dr. Scott pulls a small toolkit from her pocket and gets to work on the panel, removing the cover to expose the wiring inside. Burke stands next to her, holding a small flashlight to illuminate the circuitry. Simmons and I take up positions at either end of the corridor, weapons ready. I keep glancing back at Dr. Scott, watching her work. Her hands move with practiced precision, connecting and disconnecting wires. "Almost got it," she murmurs after a few minutes. That's when I hear footsteps approaching from my end of the corridor. I signal to Simmons, who nods and moves closer to Dr. Scott and Burke. "Company," I whisper. "How much longer?" "Just a few more seconds," Dr. Scott replies, not looking up from her work. The footsteps grow louder. I press myself against the wall, hoping whoever it is will pass by without noticing us. But the footsteps slow as they approach the intersection ahead. I raise my weapon, ready to fire if necessary. A shadow appears on the wall, growing larger as the person gets closer. Then, to my surprise, a familiar face rounds the corner. "Bush?" I lower my weapon slightly, still wary. "What are you doing here?" Private Austin Bush looks as startled to see me as I am to see him. He's alone, carrying a tablet and wearing his standard uniform. "Alvarez," he says. "I've been looking for you. After the announcement, I got reassigned to Deck 8. They locked us in, but I managed to get out through the ventilation system. I'm still suspicious." "How did you find us?" "I didn't," he admits. "I was trying to get to engineering to access the comms system. Thought maybe I could send a message out." Before I can respond, Dr. Scott calls out, "Got it." The access door slides open with a soft hiss. Bush's eyes widen. "What are you guys doing?" I make a quick decision. "We're trying to override the navigation lock and shut down the void drive. You in?" He hesitates only briefly before nodding. "Yeah, I'm in." "Good," I say, gesturing for him to join us. "Stay close and follow our lead." We move through the access door into a narrow corridor that leads directly to engineering. I can hear the low hum of machinery growing louder as we approach. "Engineering will be staffed," Burke warns. "We need a distraction." "I'll handle it," Simmons says. He pulls a small device from his pocket, a portable alarm unit from the security office. "When I activate this, everyone in engineering will have to respond. Standard protocol." Once they're out, we slip in and head for the core access, I say. "Dr. Scott, you'll need to get us through the final door." She nods. "I can do it." "What about me?" Bush asks. "Stay with Dr. Scott," I tell him. "Keep her safe while she works." We reach the end of the corridor, which opens into a small anteroom outside engineering. Through the reinforced glass window in the door, I can see about 5 crew members moving around the main engineering bay. "Everyone ready?" I ask, looking around at our small group. Burke nods, her face tense but determined. Simmons gives me a thumbs up, alarm unit ready in his hand. Dr. Scott takes a deep breath and adjusts her toolkit, while Bush checks the corridor behind us. "On 3, I say quietly. 1, 2, 3. Simmons activates the alarm unit and slides it under the door into engineering. Immediately, a high-pitched wailing fills the area. Through the window, I watch the engineering crew react, heads snapping up, bodies tensing, then moving toward the exits as they've been trained to do. "Security alert in engineering," a voice announces over the ship's comms. "All engineering personnel evacuate immediately." The crew files out through the main door on the opposite side of the bay, heading toward the designated evacuation point. As soon as the last person disappears, I push open our door and we slip inside. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before security realizes it's a false alarm," Burke says, moving quickly toward the core access door at the far end of engineering. The engineering bay is massive, rows of computer terminals, monitoring stations, and equipment racks. The ship's engines aren't here. They're located at the stern, but all the control systems are, and, most importantly, the access point to the ship's core. Dr. Scott leads us to the far wall, where a heavy metal door is marked Core Access, Authorized Personnel Only. Next to it is a security panel requiring both a keycard and a biometric scan. "This will take longer," Dr. Scott says, already pulling tools from her kit. The security is much more sophisticated. "How long?" I ask, keeping my voice low despite the alarm still blaring. 10 minutes, maybe 15. I exchange a look with Simmons. "That's cutting it close." "I'll do my best," she says, already focusing on the panel. "Bush, stay with her," I order. "Burke, watch the main entrance. Simmons and I will check the other access points." We spread out, taking up defensive positions around engineering. I move to a computer terminal near the core access door, keeping watch while also trying to access any information about the ship's current status. Most systems are locked, but I can see basic diagnostics, power levels, life support, navigation. What I see makes my stomach drop. Power consumption is off the charts, way beyond normal operational parameters. The void drive is running at nearly 200% capacity, and the ship's trajectory is taking us farther from any inhabited systems with each passing minute. "Dr. Scott," I call over, "you need to see this." She glances up from her work. "What is it?" "Power consumption. The drive is overclocking itself." She moves to my terminal, eyes scanning the readouts. "This isn't good. The drive is accelerating its consumption rate. It needs more energy than the prisoners can provide. So it's coming after the crew," I finish the thought. She nods grimly. "And at this rate, it'll burn through everyone on board within a week." The implications hit me hard. we're not just fighting to get home anymore. We're fighting for our lives, and we're running out of time. "How's that door coming?" I ask. "Almost there," she says, returning to her work. "The biometric scanner is the hard part. I need to spoof it with a valid signature." Bush hovers nearby, watching Dr. Scott work while keeping an eye on the corridor beyond. "Can't we just blast it open?" he asks. I shake my head. Core is protected by fail-safes. Forced entry would trigger an automatic lockdown. We'd never get in. From across the room, Burke calls out, "Movement in the main corridor. Security's coming." Simmons moves to her position, peering through the window. 4 guards, moving fast. "Dr. Scott," I prompt, tension rising. "Almost there," she mutters, fingers flying over the security panel. "Just need to..." "Got it." The panel flashes green, and the heavy door slides open with a hydraulic hiss. Beyond it lies a narrow corridor bathed in blue light, leading to the ship's core. "Everyone in now," I order. We file through the door quickly. Dr. Scott goes first, then Bush, then Burke. Simmons and I take up the rear, backing through the door just as the first security team enters engineering. "Close it," I tell Dr. Scott once we're all through. She taps the panel on our side, and the door slides shut. "I can lock it from here," she says, working the controls. "That should buy us some time." The core access corridor stretches about 30 feet ahead of us, sloping gently downward. The blue light comes from illuminated strips along the floor and ceiling, giving everything an eerie, underwater quality. The walls here are different, smoother, almost glossy, with a faint pattern of circuitry visible beneath the surface. "What is this place?" Bush asks, voice hushed. "The neural pathway to the core," Dr. Scott explains. "The ship's nervous system, essentially." "Stay in the center," I warn, remembering the rippling walls from earlier. "Don't touch anything." We move down the corridor in single file, Dr. Scott leading the way. I can feel a vibration through the soles of my boots, growing stronger as we approach the core. The air feels charged, like just before a lightning strike. "There," Dr. Scott points ahead. "The central processing chamber." The corridor opens into a large circular room. In the center stands a column of swirling energy contained within a transparent cylinder that stretches from floor to ceiling. The energy pulses and shifts, sometimes taking on almost recognizable shapes before dissolving again. Around the perimeter of the room are control stations, computer terminals, and monitoring equipment. "That's the void drive?" Burke asks, staring at the column. Dr. Scott nods. "The visible manifestation of it, yes. The actual drive mechanisms extend throughout the ship." "How do we shut it down?" Simmons asks. "We don't," Dr. Scott says. "Not completely. That would kill life support and everyone on board. But we can override the navigation systems and redirect the ship, and we can reduce its power consumption to minimal levels." She moves to one of the control stations and begins typing. "I need a few minutes to access the core systems. The security is extensive." "We'll keep watch," I say. "Simmons, cover the entrance. Burke, take the other side of the room. Bush, stay with Dr. Scott." We take up our positions, weapons ready. The room is eerily quiet except for the soft hum of the void drive and the clicking of Dr. Scott's fingers on the keyboard. I keep my eyes on the entrance, but I can't help glancing at the swirling column in the center of the room. The energy inside seems to respond to our presence, moving more actively, reaching toward the edges of its containment. "It knows we're here," I murmur. "It's semi-sentient," Dr. Scott says without looking up from her work. "Designed to seek out and convert biological energy. Right now, it's curious about us." "Great," Simmons mutters. "The ship wants to eat us." "How much longer, Doc?" I ask. "Almost there," she replies. "The system is fighting me, but I've almost got navigation access." That's when I notice something odd about the wall near Bush. A slight ripple, almost imperceptible at first, but growing stronger. The glossy surface begins to bulge outward, reaching toward him. "Bush!" I shout. "Move!" He turns, sees the wall moving, and jumps back. But he's not fast enough. The bulge extends with lightning speed, wrapping around his arm like liquid metal. "Help!" he cries, trying to pull away. I lunge forward, grabbing his other arm and pulling with all my strength. Simmons rushes over to help, both of us straining to free Bush from the wall's grip. "Shoot it!" Bush yells, panic in his eyes. "No!" Dr. Scott shouts. "Damaging the neural pathway could trigger a system-wide response." The wall continues to pull, drawing Bush closer despite our efforts. His body begins to stretch and distort, just like I saw happen to Medina in the corridor weeks ago. "I can't hold him," Simmons grunts. Bush's eyes find mine, wide with terror. "Alvarez, please." I pull harder, my muscles screaming with the effort. But it's no use. The wall pulls with impossible strength, drawing Bush inexorably closer. "I'm sorry," I gasp. With a final, desperate cry, Bush is pulled into the wall. His body stretches, thins, and then disappears entirely, absorbed into the ship's structure. One moment he's there, the next he's gone. Not even a ripple left to show where he was. "No," I slam my fist against the now solid wall. "God damn it." "Patrick," Burke says, using my first name for the first time. "We need to keep moving. We can't help him now." She's right, but that doesn't make it any easier. Bush was one of us, one of the few who saw the truth about what was happening on this ship. And now he's gone, converted into energy to feed the void drive. "Dr. Scott," I say, forcing myself to focus. "How close are you?" "I've got access," she says, her voice shaky but determined. "I'm working on overriding the navigation protocols now." Suddenly, an alarm blares throughout the chamber. Red lights flash along the walls, and a computerized voice announces, "Security breach detected. Core lockdown initiated." "They know we're here," Burke says, raising her weapon. "Keep working," I tell Dr. Scott. "We'll handle security." The door to the core access corridor slides open, and armed guards pour through, led by a figure I recognize immediately, Captain Zane Dixon. He's flanked by Lieutenant Michaels and 3 security officers, all with weapons drawn. "Private Alvarez," Dixon says, his voice calm despite the situation. "I'm disappointed, but not surprised to find you here." "It's over, Dixon," I reply, keeping my weapon trained on him. "We know what this ship really is, what you've been doing to the prisoners, to the crew." "What I've been doing?" Dixon shakes his head. "I'm following orders, Private, just like you're supposed to do." "Orders to sacrifice thousands of people?" Burke steps forward, her own weapon aimed at Dixon's chest. "To feed them to this thing." Dixon's eyes flick to her. "Lieutenant Burke, I expected better from you. Project Void is the future of space travel. Yes, there are sacrifices, but think of what we're achieving. Interstellar travel without the limitations of conventional fuel." "Using people as fuel isn't progress," I say. "It's murder." "It's necessity," Dixon counters. "The resources required for conventional interstellar travel are depleting rapidly. Project Void offers a sustainable alternative." "Sustainable?" Simmons scoffs. "You're burning through prisoners like kindling." Dixon's expression hardens. "Lower your weapons. This is your only warning." None of us move. For a moment, the chamber is silent except for the hum of the drive and Dr. Scott's typing. Then Dixon sighs. "Very well." He gives a slight nod, and the security team opens fire. We dive for cover behind the control stations as bullets ricochet around the chamber. I return fire, aiming for the guards rather than Dixon himself. Beside me, Burke and Simmons do the same. The firefight is chaotic, bullets flying, people shouting. I manage to hit one of the guards, who goes down clutching his shoulder. Simmons takes out another with a clean shot to the leg. But they have better positions and more people. A bullet grazes my arm, tearing through my uniform and leaving a burning trail across my skin. I hear Burke cry out and turn to see her fall, blood blooming on her side. "Burke!" I crawl to her, keeping low to avoid the gunfire. "I'm okay," she gasps, pressing her hand to the wound. "Keep fighting." I nod and return to the fight, firing at the remaining guards. Across the room, Simmons is pinned down behind a console, exchanging shots with Michaels. Then I hear Simmons shout in pain. I look over to see him slump against the console, blood spreading across his chest. "Ray!" I call out, but he doesn't respond. It's just me now. Burke wounded, Simmons down, Bush gone, and Dr. Scott still working frantically at the control station. I need to buy her more time. I fire my last few rounds, forcing Dixon and the remaining guards to take cover. Then I make a decision. While they're pinned down, I sprint across the chamber to Dr. Scott's position. "How close?" I ask, crouching beside her. "Almost there," she says, not looking up from the screen. "I've bypassed the navigation lock. Now I'm uploading all our evidence to the ship's emergency beacon." Evidence? Everything we've documented about the disappearances, the prisoner counts, the void drive, all of it, broadcasting on an emergency frequency. I hadn't even considered that possibility. Will anyone hear it? "Eventually," she says. "Once we change course back toward inhabited space, the signal will reach Alliance outposts." A bullet hits the console next to us, sending sparks flying. Dr. Scott flinches but keeps working. "Hurry," I urge. "Done," she says, hitting a final key. "The navigation is unlocked. We're changing course, and the distress signal is active." The ship shudders beneath our feet, the void drive column pulsing erratically as the new commands take effect. The energy inside swirls faster, angry red streaks appearing in the blue light. "What's happening?" I ask. "The drive is fighting the course change," Dr. Scott explains. "It's been programmed to maintain its original trajectory." Across the chamber, Dixon shouts something to his remaining men. They begin advancing on our position, firing as they come. "We need to get out of here," I say, pulling Dr. Scott away from the console. But before we can move, the walls of the chamber begin to ripple and shift. Not just in one spot, but everywhere. Floor, ceiling, walls, all of it moving like liquid. "The drive is destabilizing," Dr. Scott cries. "It's trying to consume more energy to maintain course." One of Dixon's men screams as the floor beneath him liquefies, pulling him down. Another backs away from a bulging wall, only to be caught by another protrusion behind him. Dixon himself stands frozen, watching in horror as his security team is consumed one by one. The maintenance pod. Dr. Scott points to a small, egg-shaped chamber built into the wall near us. It's shielded against the drive's effects. We might be safe in there. We make a run for it, zigzagging across the chamber as the floor ripples and shifts beneath our feet. I glance back to see Burke, still wounded, trying to crawl away from a moving section of floor. "Burke!" I change direction, heading toward her. "No!" she shouts. "Get to the pod. Complete the mission." Before I can reach her, the floor rises up around her like a wave, enveloping her completely. She doesn't even have time to scream before she's gone. "No!" I stop, staring at the spot where she was just seconds ago. "Patrick!" Dr. Scott calls from the maintenance pod. "Hurry!" I turn back, forcing myself to move toward the pod. Dixon sees me running and raises his weapon, but before he can fire, the wall behind him surges forward, wrapping around his body. The last thing I see is his face, contorted in shock and fear before he's pulled into the wall. The entire chamber is in chaos now, every surface moving and shifting. The void drive column pulses wildly, the energy inside it swirling in a frenzied pattern. I reach the maintenance pod just as the floor beneath me begins to liquefy. Dr. Scott grabs my arm and pulls me inside, sealing the door behind us. The pod is small, barely large enough for 2 people, with a reinforced viewport that looks out into the chamber. Through it, I watch as the void drive consumes everything, the control stations, the remaining security personnel, even Simmons' body. "Will this hold?" I ask, feeling the pod vibrate around us. It should, Dr. Scott says. These pods are designed to withstand drive fluctuations. The ship lurches violently, throwing us against the pod walls. Through the viewport, I see the void drive column flaring brighter, the energy inside it spinning faster and faster. What's happening to the ship? I ask. Without enough biological energy to consume, the drive is trying to draw power from the ship's systems, Dr. Scott explains. But it can't sustain itself that way. It's designed specifically for biological conversion. Another violent shudder runs through the ship, stronger than before. Warning lights flash inside the pod, and an automated voice announces, "Critical system failure. Prepare for emergency protocols." "We're losing power," Dr. Scott says, checking the pod's small control panel. The drive is shutting down. Through the viewport, I watch as the swirling energy in the void drive column begins to dim, the frantic movement slowing. The rippling walls gradually solidify, returning to their normal state. "Is it over?" I ask. Dr. Scott shakes her head. The drive is offline, but so are most of the ship's systems. Life support, propulsion, everything except emergency power. What does that mean for us? "It means we're adrift," she says simply. "The emergency beacon is still broadcasting our evidence and distress call, but without propulsion, we're not getting back to inhabited space on our own." "So, we wait for rescue?" "Yes, and hope someone picks up our signal before life support fails completely." I lean back against the pod wall, exhaustion washing over me. We've stopped the void drive, but at a terrible cost. Simmons, Burke, Bush, all gone, and hundreds more before them, prisoners and crew alike, consumed by the ship. "How long do we have?" I ask. "Emergency life support can last for weeks," Dr. Scott says. "Maybe longer in this pod. It has its own oxygen supply." I nod, trying to find some comfort in that. Weeks of waiting, drifting through space in this tiny pod, with nothing but the hope that someone will hear our distress call. But we did it. We exposed Project Void. The evidence is broadcasting, a continuous signal that will eventually reach Alliance space. Someone will hear it. Someone will come looking, and they'll find our record of what happened aboard the Meridian. The pod's emergency lights cast a soft blue glow over us as the ship grows quieter around us. The violent shuddering has stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness. Through the viewport, I can see the void drive column now completely dark, the energy that once swirled inside it gone. I close my eyes, feeling the weight of everything we've lost. But we've won, in a way. The ship can't consume any more lives. The truth is out there, broadcasting across space. All we can do now is wait.